So I'm like, hey, I'll sell off all my racing stuff and let's open a computer store. And he's like, I don't care. We're flying you to San Francisco. You're doing 1-day passport and then you're getting on a plane and going to China. The next day, like wearing a Valve shirt, and I don't know where Gabe was. He never even showed up. I just like showed up at Valve and I just wandered the building all day. I'm like,
this is a long and really exciting and interesting interview with Jeri, the CEO of Tilt 5. We talked about everything from dirt car racing to building the Commodore 64 all-in-one systems. She was behind that. And we'll also dive into working at Valve and the latest and greatest AR technology that I didn't even know existed until very recently, and now I'm extremely excited about. In fact, I liked it so much that I even convinced them to talk at our upcoming GameDev Guild conference this 24th of May. By the way, we're also having a pre-event mixer this Sunday so that the attendees can get together, talk to each other, talk to the sponsors, and talk to other developers about game development and have some interesting, fun discussions and meet other people. The last one was such a big hit that we decided to do a second one. We'll also have that open during the conference for all of our attendees to get together and make new contacts, meet new friends, and have a lot of fun. If you're interested in that, make sure that you check out GameDev Guild down below. And even if you're not, please just hit the subscribe button, like, and share the video. And I really hope that you enjoy this interview.
this seems like a great interview. We should just go with this.
Yeah, just like this. Well, hey everybody, I'm here with Jeri from Tilt 5. She's the CEO and really awesome person with a lot of interesting things to talk about. I really wanted to talk to you today because I stumbled across your product at GDC, the Game Developer Conference up in San Francisco. Well, actually, I was kind of loosely pulled over by a subscriber who said, hey, you should come check this out. And I was looking at it and from afar, I was like, oh, okay, that might be neat. And then I put on these little goggles and I was blown away. And I was instantly like, okay, I got to talk to people about this, share this with people, and see how I order one myself. So as soon as I tried that thing on, I was just completely shocked with how awesome it was. And I wanted to talk to you and the whole team and see what it is you're building, how this whole thing works, and how you kind of made this magical device actually happen and made an AR product that I want to buy, because I've seen a lot of AR products. I've told people this before. I've seen dozens and dozens of them, and they all are kind of cool, and I'm all like, yeah, that would kind of be neat. I could probably come up with some business case for it somewhere, but I've never wanted to actually buy one for myself. This thing I instantly wanted to order. I was like, I can make games for this. I can come up with all kinds of cool ideas for this thing and actually have fun with it just playing with what's there. So
we would promote the heck out of anything you make for it. So
well, I'm definitely going to have to make something because it's definitely a lot of fun. It's a very, very cool device. And I guess I just wanted to open it up to you and just quickly introduce it. What is the device Tilt 5's got?
So Tilt 5 has a unique AR system. It's lightweight glasses that you can just slip on. You don't have to like ratchet them to your head or anything. Just stick them on. We also have a magic wand so you can interact with these holograms. And the whole core of our system is bringing people together around the table. So we optimized everything in the system so it's great within arm's reach. So if you're doing a solo game, everything kind of happens close to you. If your friends are over and you're playing a game together, you can sit around the table and view these magical holograms just like running all over your table. Your response to what we're doing is pretty common. There's a lot of hype out there in the AR space, like people showing or companies showing whales jumping out of gymnasiums and just crazy stuff. And I think overall we've just tried to really focus on entertainment, stuff you can do on the table, whether it's, a traditional board game or an action or strategy or a puzzle game. It's just all games, and entertainment. And by doing that, we've been able to make the system really work well in that situation. And then also by doing that, we've made some compromises. So when you talked about other AR systems are neat, but they don't really cater to what you want to do. I think part of the problem is a lot of companies are trying to go for the ultimate in AR. Like we all dream of walking down the street and monsters are jumping off the top of buildings and stuff like that.
Light glasses on and nothing else, right?
Yeah, as thin as a pair of
Your
Ray-Bans and stuff.
contacts in
And
there.
there's in the AR XR space, there's some big challenges in front of us the next couple decades. There's just the laws of physics we have to deal with. And so the clever part of our system is like, okay, we've constrained the problem to something really cool and fun. So what can we do to overcome these laws of physics? Like how fast can we bend light and get it into your eyes? And so the clever hack that I stumbled onto was this ability to project out from the glasses to a special game board that has this material in it called a retro reflector. And this is a really cool optical material that any light that strikes it goes directly back where it comes. So if you project out of the glasses down to this giant game board you put on the table, now we have all this distance to work between you and the table, and it allows us to have a super big field of view. It's a 110-degree field of view, really high contrast. You get real blacks, you get vivid colors, and then the thing that's the most special about it, and maybe you didn't even realize it was happening when you looked at it, is we generate a light field in front of you. And basically what a light field means is the light's coming from the correct places at the correct focal distances. So when you wear the glasses, you probably played one of our little intro demos where it's like this forest scene that you're running through a forest and there's all these trees and monsters and stuff popping up.
That was one of them. Yeah, I played through them all.
Yeah, you didn't even scratch the surface. We should have taken you to the offsite location, let you play third-party games. Those guys are really rocking it. But yeah, it means you can focus like on a tree branch that's up close and everything in the background goes out of focus, and you focus past the tree branch and the tree branch goes out of focus as if it was a real tree there on the table. And that means that you're not forcing your eyes to focus off at infinity like you do in VR, and it reduces eye fatigue and it feels really realistic, like there's something there.
That's crazy. That's way more advanced than I even realized. I just, when I put it on, I was like, this is awesome. I had no idea how it was working. I was like, I don't know,
Well, that was
especially the field of view part. That's what threw me off at first. I was expecting, to be honest, I was expecting something like the HoloLens, where I'd get this
a little
little
tiny.
square and I'd be looking, and as long as I didn't move my head too much, everything would be fine. But I was just able to walk around and look around, and everything was perfect, and I was just blown away, especially with the depth in 3D too. So
Yeah, well, that there's a lot of considerations we put into the glasses to make them look non-high tech. Everything from like the soft curves, the color, and things like that. And it's so funny. Sometimes we show this to, various folks, and they're like, "Oh, that's absolutely trivial. Like, what you're doing is like, well, not exactly. Like, if you put it in comparison to like the run-of-the-mill VR headset that's two plastic lenses and a cell phone screen, like to generate this light field, get all the light rays going in the right place, we have 24, 25 lenses per projector, like buried up in here, these little tiny, tiny lenses, and we have to like focus them all perfectly. We have to do all this alignment, and it's actually super high tech in here, even though it may look closer to a toy than a piece of space age gear.
it's very deceptive, that little tiny thing. And to be honest, I kind of assumed it was not nearly as advanced myself when I saw it. I was like, oh, cool, some
A
nice
little
lightweight
toy or something.
glasses, and they somehow show stuff. I had no idea the tech was anywhere near as cool as it is, but it explains why it's so much different than all of the other things that I've seen. It was just night and day comparison from everything else that I've seen, and now I kind of understand it. So you're projecting down there, it's coming back, and you're getting a much better quality product out of that,
Yeah,
or at least a
yeah,
much
yeah.
better
This
quality
this technique.
for this use case by far.
Yeah, this particular technique has so much flexibility. We're gonna, as far as all the other AR that's like up and coming, like we're gonna have, a huge advantage for many years to come doing this. And of course, my background working at Valve Software like 12 years ago, like I've seen and actually built almost every type of AR and VR out there. So, you know, when I stumbled onto this, I was like, yeah, this is the way that we make a mass market consumer product. My whole goal is like my background, I've done consumer products for most of my professional career. And I love working on products that have a chance to be in like 100 million homes. And so that's our goal is like, how do we build a product that, brings the family together, heightens the gaming experience, and can be as like big as like a Nintendo Switch or a Wii or something like that, that just, you know, everybody has to have. And it comes back to all these trade-offs. If you boil the ocean, you end up with a product that doesn't appeal to like anybody. But if you optimize it down for like the audience, then you can make really great products. And I'm no genius about this. It's like I worked with amazing products people through the years, and so that's how like I was able to like bring this like vision to Tilt Five and like guide the engineers. And I should stop and say like, sometimes the credit for inventing this is like heaped onto me, but it's actually, we have dozens of engineers that actually took like this crazy optical design I came up with and this kind of idea of like focusing the company. They did all the hard work to turn it into a product. And in fact, I was just showing someone the other day, we have a 400-page book that we published internally for the team that has the evolution of the product, every experiment we did. It's a beautiful book, everything starting from like our mood boards, talking about like, what is Till 5, who is our audience, what's our aesthetic that we want that will not feel like too techy, to like every one of our iterations of like the ergonomics. It's kind of cool. Like we have this magic wand, it allows you to reach in at 6 degrees of freedom. So you can poke things and pick things up and shoot things and do all kinds of stuff with it. And as we were working on this ergonomics, like we all hated this look. We're like, it looks like a barbecue lighter. Can we find anything better than a barbecue lighter? We went through many dozens or even yeah. Yeah, I wish I had some of the prototypes in here, but we had things that looked very much like an Oculus controller with loops on it. We had things that had a giant, like, faceted ball on it. We had things that looked like a stingray. And all of them had, like, downsides as far as usability. And we kept coming back to this particular design because it allows you to interact with your holograms, or, I say holograms, but your game objects out there, and it's the least intrusive because it's just a little tiny stick and it doesn't block the image, and it just
you
works.
Can just
and it's
easily point directly where you want and then visually override it if you want.
Exactly. And everyone knows how to like pick up a hot glue gun or something and pull a trigger. So what we found is we show this to non-gamers, and that was kind of one of our missions, is like, how do we get everyone in the family to play? And it's like, you got grandpa that doesn't play games, or grandma. Can you get them to just pull one button and have a moment of delight? And it turns out, like, when we show non-gamers, they're able to pick it up and just get right in there. And of course, we wanted to add features. So like for regular gamers, you can hold it sideways.
Yeah, once they get comfortable with it and they start pulling the trigger and shooting stuff or lighting their campfires, they can switch over to playing racing games and other things. Which is really cool.
Exactly.
It's awesome. So,
exactly.
I wanted to mention, because you talked about getting into a lot of homes and getting kind of widespread. One of the things that shocked me about the product too was the price. I was kind of, when I went home after looking at it, I was expecting like, okay, I'm gonna order one of these, but I'm gonna put it down as a business expense, and it'll be a write-off, it'll be fine. And then I went and looked at the price, and I was like, oh, I should just order a couple of them. Like, I was blown away
it's
by...
roughly the same price as a Switch or something,
yeah,
right?
I was just shocked by how cheap it was for brand new, like, awesome, unique tech that doesn't exist anywhere else. I expected, it's going to be around these HoloLens prices, or at least around, like, an HTC Vive initial price. But it was way below.
Considering
so do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh my goodness, it was so difficult to reach this point. A shameless plug. I want to say, we are now shipping units, which is great. It was a long haul getting here, and we have a pre-sale website. So if anyone's interested, you can go there and put $5 down and get in line.
And we'll have a link for that everywhere, so you can go get
Yay,
that. Everybody should go pre-order yours. I already pre-ordered mine. I'm just waiting.
we're at that phase of the business where, you know, we did a lot of the R side of R&D, and we got the development side taken care of, and now we have to turn it into a profitable business and get like unit selling so we get revenue so that we can pay game developers to help them get their games on the system. And it's a cycle, you know. But it's exciting. You know, by the end of the summer we should be caught up on our backlog. Anyway, how did we get here? I mean, maybe it would be beneficial to talk about some of my background, and then I can weave in kind of the evolution of how I came from Valve Software, spent 8 years developing this, and got to a product that's jam-packed of electronics and optics.
Yeah, I think that would be great. You want to real quickly tell everybody how much it costs, though?
Oh, it's $359, and that's our kind of deluxe kit. You get the big game board that has some functions where you can flip it up and have like, you know, some other cool stuff, and you get the wand, you get the headset, and the headset can plug into an Android phone. The drivers are almost out for that. You can plug into a PC, and our PC drivers, we're just finishing off multi-glasses from one PC, so you can have really stunning PC level graphics.
Awesome.
And then later in the year, we're going to have iOS support once we work around all the limitations of iOS.
Now I'm even more shocked. I did not expect you were going to say it could run on Android and iOS. I thought for sure it was going to be PC only, but that is freaking amazing.
Well, actually, you know, to divert us on another tangent real quick, it's like to do that was quite a trick to be able to run on mobile devices. So anyone familiar with VR development, it's tricky because you have to maintain a really high frame rate, and if you develop for an Oculus Quest, you have to make sure that you keep your scenes very simplistic so that you can keep that 90 to 100 whatever frames per second going. Anytime it drops below that, you start having trouble and bad user experiences. So, you know, way back years ago, I had this idea. I'm like, well, what if we decouple the game engine from all of this image stabilization and reprojection that we need to do to place the images on the table? And so for years and years, there were no chips available to do that. And in recent years, the last 3 years, there's a particular chip that my co-founder was able to bend around his will and do a lot of close to the metal programming, but to make all the tracking and all this reprojection done in the headset. And basically what that means is the game engine can run asynchronous. It can run at 30 frames a second. We receive the images over just plain USB, and then we upscale them to 180 frames per second. So no matter what happens in the game, you get this buttery, smooth, you know, experience. And you probably didn't even notice, but that like forest scene that we were showing you had lots of geometry in it, and it was hacked together by one of our devs in like 2 hours from some Unity assets.
Yeah, it's one of the big demo scenes. A lot of people have probably seen it before.
Oh yeah, it's like everyone saw it, and it's like we were actually at first when we were like, oh, this is really good. It shows off our system. Are we embarrassed about just showing asset store stuff? And we're like, no, like it's great. We put it together in 2 hours, and
it gives great context for everybody because they know that they can just grab any old pack, pull it in there, and it's not going to fall apart. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing you probably didn't notice is we put zero effort into when the characters spawn in. Actually, the frame rate like stalls for like a half a second. You don't even notice because we're doing all this reprojection. Everything's buttery smooth on the headset. But that allows us to run on Android and iOS, and allows us to run on a PC where, you know, if you have multiple, you know, scenes, you're going to be like, if you're running 2 headsets, you're running 4 images out. You know, if you're running 4 headsets, you know, there's all these different perspectives into the scene that are getting rendered, and your frame rate's going to take a big hit from that. So as long as your animations look smooth enough, you're good to go.
And you just offload a lot of that to the headset. That's awesome.
Yeah. So again, it's like this little toy-looking plastic thing has all this stuff that no other company's doing yet, which is cool. And super proud of the team for being able to pull that off.
All the
And we did it on a shoestring too. We had no money to do this whole thing. It's ridiculous.
So you want to talk a little bit about how you guys got started with the project? Like, what was the origin of this product specifically?
Yeah, let me go back and tell a little bit of my backstory because I think it all kind of weaves into like how I had like amazing people help me through my life and kind of led me to this point because it probably wouldn't make sense if I just jump back to Valve days.
Yeah, let's go.
Um,
Let's go back, rewind a little bit further.
I'm sorry, this is oh, it's 5 years old. Yeah, I hope I don't bore your audience, but yeah, I was a child of the 80s, so you probably see all this stuff. I have an ET cartridge sitting on the shelf back here, much like uh,
Salvaged, saved from the
yeah.
pile.
And I was so into video games. Like, I was a child when arcades were a big thing. We'd go to the pizza parlor, and I begged my dad for like quarters, and he'd give me like 50 cents, and I'd go hang out in the arcade room and like look at every single game. Like, I'd spend like 20 minutes in there looking at every one to figure out where my two quarters were gonna go because I had to like choose wisely and enamored with graphics and like computers and like the future's here, like right now it's going to be so great. And fan of Star Wars, of course, when I saw the Millennium Falcon and the holograms on the table, it's like someday I'm going to be playing video games like that. But I lived in rural Oregon, a town of like 3,000 people, didn't have any access to, you know, any kind of science or technology people to learn from. But I was very fortunate because my father got me an early home computer, the Commodore 64, and I would sit in front of that and just poke away at it until my eyes glazed over, staring at a blurry television screen, you know, dreaming of the day that I could make my own video games.
Now, were you copying games out of magazines into your Commodore 64?
Oh my God, I was so young. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, you know, barely could read at that point. And I'm one finger poking these things in. So it's like these magazines had these basic listings for these games, and they were like 4 pages long. So it'd take me like 2 hours to poke these things in. And of course, you'd make like dozens of syntax errors along the way. Even though my dad did splurge and get me a disk drive, I didn't know how to save anything to the disk drive.
Yeah, same here.
So I poke these things in, spend like hours and hours on them, and then hit run and either have a syntax error, or if it was like poking machine language in, it would poke the machine language in and like crash the computer.
Just
But that didn't deter me. You know, even though the games didn't work, I was having the time of my life.
yeah, because every now and then it works, and you get super excited. Like, this one actually worked. I usually would blame the
Yeah,
magazine instead of myself. This magazine is all wrong. It doesn't work.
of course. Yeah, so that was super fun. I was really into electronics. I took apart all of my toys, which was really frustrating for my father. So he would get me a toy, and I was like this curious kid. I must know how this thing works. And so, as soon as I could turn a screwdriver, I was taking the screws out of things. And in the early days, I couldn't get things put back together, so it was mostly just take things apart. In fact, my Commodore 64, I blew it out 2 or 3 times because my dad had bought me a couple video game cartridges, like Donkey Kong.
Oh.
Oh, you know, things like that. And I plugged in the cartridge, and the game would pop up, and I had this vague notion of electronics, like it's wires connecting things together. So if I connect the right wires together in the cartridge port, I'll have a video game. So I would take forks and knives and jam into the cartridge port, and it would like encourage me to do this because you would jam things in the cartridge port, and the screen would like glitch out, and you'd have all these colors, and sometimes like a weird sound would pop
You
up.
almost
And
had a game.
yeah, just if I just got the right connections.
That's
So,
great.
super curious kid. My father owned a gas station in town. He was a mechanic, and he got tired of like me tearing apart all the toys, and he recognized that I was into electronics. So he actually put a box out in front of his gas station, like "Bring your broken electronics" was on it, like a sign. And so, like maybe once a month, I'd get like a box full of like little gadgets that I could tear apart. Didn't know anything about what I was looking at. I would take all the little resistors and transistors and like bend them back and forth and break them off the circuit boards, and I would just like make little piles in my room of like these colorful components and like dream about the day that I could like build something.
Start collecting them so you can build something later.
Yeah, yeah. I think I still have some of those parts kicking around in my collection. So,
Nice.
but yeah, eventually he got me some like electronic kits, and I started learning a little bit. And I would take apart a toy, and I would like change it a little bit. I'd like figure out how to change a resistor, and like it would like change the brightness of an LED or something. I was like really
Ooh.
felt that I was on my way. And um, in fact, you need a soldering iron to melt the solder on the circuit boards. And my father thought I'd burn the house down, so he wouldn't let me have a soldering iron. So I'm like 10 or something at the time, and I found that I could take a resistor and hook it to one of these wall warts and like short the wall wart across the resistor, and it would get really hot, and then I could melt solder with the little steel lead that came out of the resistor. And that was my soldering iron for like years until my dad caught me one day.
Oh, so reduce the chance of burning the house down by getting your kid a soldering iron.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he did. He's like, "Oh, here, I'll get you a soldering iron. I'm going to teach you how to use it." Like he actually caught me because the thing was like on this end of this wire, and I had all this tape wrapped around it so it wouldn't burn my hands, the heat coming down the wire, and I'm like trying to do this thing.
Like, I don't
And
need
one
a
day it was
soldering
like
iron. I'm good.
it fell off my desk and like burned a hole in the carpet, and he's like, "What the F is going on in here? Like, why is there a burn mark on the floor?" Anyway, I'm making this story way too long. Fortunately for me, I ran into a couple mentors, and so my whole story is about people taking me under their wing, and that's so important. And I can't emphasize that to anyone that wants to break into any industry. Like, if you can find the right mentors and you get this like feedback loop of like showing them appreciation, they will teach you everything you need to know. So I ran into a couple ham radio operators hanging out at the local public library, and they're like, "We'll teach you electronics," because these ham radio operators are building radios and doing all their own electronics. And so they got my start. They started teaching me the real fundamentals of electronics. But yet, I was this really weird kid, though. So by the time I got to high school, I was the kid that all the bullies in school would pick on, and they could make me cry really easily. So I was the target. You too?
Yeah, it happened quite a bit. I hated high school.
Yeah, yeah. And so I was not very happy in high school. And actually, kind of a pivotal moment in my life is this kid that was like relentlessly picking on me, like picked on me one day, and I was carrying like a biology book or something, one of these big thick books, and I'm walking in the front of the class, and he did something, and I just snapped. Something in my brain went haywire, and I took this book like you would throw a discus and just clobbered him across the head, and he like flipped out of his chair onto the floor about the time that the teacher walked in the door to see me do this. And next thing I know is like my feet, the teacher grabbed my arm, dragging me down to the principal's office. I don't think my feet touched the floor like the whole way there. And I got suspended. And my father was so amazing. Like, he knew that, I was being picked on and stuff. And I told him what happened. And he was basically like, "Good.
Yeah.
Fucker deserved it."
Yep.
So I had a very supportive father. And when I came back to school after my suspension, like the bad kids, all the stoners and goth kids were like, "Hey, you're pretty cool." And I started kind of running with that crowd. And I learned the more wild and crazy I was, the more people left me alone. And so I started being this like crazy goth kid looking to get in trouble all the time. And my grades just went through the floor. I had like probably the lowest GPA in the school, and very wild. And of course, my father being supportive was very concerned for me at this point.
I can imagine.
But yeah, yeah. But I had been working at my father's gas station after work, and he it kind of got me introduced to cars. I'd been working at my dad's gas station to save up money to buy computers and video games and things like this. And he taught me how to change oil and pull valve covers off and adjust backlash, just everything on cars. So I was really getting into cars at the time. And my father had raced kind of this jalopy class of dirt oval race cars when I was much younger, and I thought that was so wild and crazy and cool. So I started begging my father, build me a race car. I want to be a race car driver. And he's like, no way, you're going to kill yourself. And I pestered him and pestered him. And finally, I got him to relent. I was probably 16 or 17 at the time. And he's like, the only way you're going to get a race car is you either have to figure out a way to save up money to get one, which he knew was impossible for me, working for $3.25 an hour, or you build one.
Well,
And so I'm like, I know how to build things. I've been building a lot of things. So again, mentors kick in at this point. I went around our local area and talked to all the machine shops in town, and I found this machinist looking for, a little free labor. And like, I really want to know how to weld and machine things. And so he would let me come in on Saturdays, and he would put me to work doing, dirty work around the shop, like cleaning the chips out of the bed of his lathe. And in exchange, towards the end of the day, he would teach me how to like tap holes in metal and how to use a MIG welder and a TIG welder and turn things and,
that's awesome.
run yeah, it was awesome. And so I started getting these like skills, signed up for the high school metal shop, and started on the sly building parts of this race car. Convinced the shop teacher after a while to let me start building the race car at school, which was amazing. So
That
I
is
started
cool.
building this chassis. I got these books and videos on how to build race cars and started like obsessing over them and studying like everything in them. And partway through this, my father's like, okay, you're going to kill yourself if I don't like intervene and help. So I actually got my father on board to help, and he taught me more about how to build safe race cars and stuff like that. And uh, started my racing career, which was pretty amazing. It was quarter mile dirt track, these big V8 powered cars. My dad helped me build my first engine, and I was terrible. So,
That's crazy though.
uh,
So did you find that like a lot of the skills that you had from all the engineering before really kind of it was all kind of similar and the same and that building things and putting it all together?
yeah, that's something I've learned in my career. I think you can do just about anything if you just learn the right rules and techniques around it, and if you can find the right people to help you. So, I was soldering and fabricating things and bending little pieces of metal and stuff to build little circuits and stuff like that. And so, building a race car was just bending bigger pipes or bigger things, and welding is just like, soldering, but much hotter and leave scars all over your hands and stuff. Um, Yeah, my first year of racing, I was terrible, but in my mind, I was already there. And that I think this is part of my psyche too, is like I have this like imagination that I can get there, even though I'm not there yet, and I'm pretty stubborn. And so after my first year racing this circuit, I was like 40th out of like 45 cars in the total like track points, and a big portion of the cars that were ahead of me in points hadn't even finished the entire season. They'd like totaled their car or something. That's how bad I was. But I had gotten one of these books, and in the back of the book was a phone number for the person that wrote the book. And I was like obsessively calling this guy, this Duke guy, like, hey, Duke, how do I make my car faster? And finally, he's like, I can't do this over the phone all the time. If you can come out to Florida, I lived in up near Portland at the time, in that area.
Opposite end of the country.
Yeah, if you come out here, I'll put you up with me and my wife, and I'll teach you everything you need to know about race cars. Like, I love your enthusiasm, but I can't have you calling me all the time. And so I jump on a Greyhound bus, somehow convince my father to let me do this. I'm like, maybe, again, like I'm 17, I'm young. Scariest thing I've ever done. Like, I hadn't really even probably left Oregon much at the time. Go clear across on this 5 day like bus ride with creepers and stuff on the bus. Get there, hang out with this guy. He teaches me like for the first 5 or so days, like you know, this is how you set your car up. And it's like, I kind of knew that stuff because I was reading his book, but he like instilled, like, you got to be obsessive about it. Like, and that was something I learned is like, you just have to obsess on your car and that everything is moving, like the buoyancy of your car, there's nothing binding. And that was nice to know. But the most valuable thing that he taught me probably in the second week is he like took me to the racetrack and walked me around the track. So he kind of told me about the psychology of racing, and those kinds of things have stuck with me. He taught me things like you need to know your audience, and he's like, your audience is two people in racing. It's the track promoter, and you need to know their incentives. Track promoters, their goal is not to have people racing around the track going fast necessarily. It's to get people in there buying expensive beer and nachos. And the way you get a lot of people in the stands is you have personalities around the track that attract people. And so if you can have a fan base, the promoters will give you favorable calls when there's a questionable call. And so in dirt track racing, you're like 20 to 30 cars racing around. There's a lot of contact. So there's a lot of judgment calls of like, Jeri tapped the back of this car. Was it an accident or intentional?
How much do I like her?
Yeah, that was a really interesting observation that he led me to, is that promoters aren't looking for just cars racing around the track. What they really want is personalities that draw lots of people into the grandstand buying lots of expensive beer and nachos. And so understanding that, and understanding that promoters would give you a little bit more favorable calls, like if there was a questionable moment, was super valuable. Like, this is dirt track racing, so you're 20, 25, 30 cars running around these little quarter-mile dirt tracks. There's lots of bumping and stuff going on, and you'll get black flagged if you do something intentional, but if it's an accident, it's okay. And so if your fans go up after the race and give the flagger a hard time on a questionable call, they're more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt. So, and also he spent a lot of time explaining that if it's not on the rule sheet, it's not cheating. So read the rules over at each of these racetracks and understand them thoroughly, and see if you can find a loophole for your car that gives you an advantage. And so I was obsessive looking at all the different loopholes. Another thing that he taught was the psychology of your opponents. So if you give off an air of like, I'm going to win no matter what, then they'll make mistakes. And so he taught me a bunch of little tricks, like say during a yellow flag situation, all the cars start lining up. He's like, just pull alongside the next person you're going to pass, and then just out the window, just give them the sign of like, you're going back. Just let them know you're there. Bump them a little bit on the back bumper, because no one's really paying attention to like small little collisions when you're in a yellow flag situation. So see if you can get them riled up by just sitting there tapping their bumper as you're going around the track, and see if you can get them kind of off of their groove. Also things like if you, on a yellow flag situation, if you kind of pull up on the right side of them, on the outside of the track, just do it a couple times so they mentally think that you're coming on the right side. And so when the race starts, their natural instinct is to drift up. And so then the next year I came back, I started to really embrace these things and started winning a lot of races. And when I would win, I'd get these trophies. And after a while, I filled my dad's gas station window full of all these cheapo trophies that we get for everything. And then I'm like, oh, if I just gave them away to the kids in the grandstands, I bet they would be fans for life. And it turned out that was the case. So anytime I'd win a trophy, if I could, I would just kind of toss it through the gate to the nearest kid, or after the race, I'd just go in the grandstand, find the first kid, and like, here, you want my trophy? So you immediately get the kids as fans for life, and then you get the parents.
And all the
as fans.
publicity, everybody watching. Nice.
Yeah, they want you to win, and he was so cute. Like, kids would come up to me, like, even if I didn't win that night or something, do you have a trophy? I'm like, no, I don't, but, here's a sticker or something. And then the things like rules, any loopholes. So I did things like I made a traction control system for my car. It wasn't in the rules. You couldn't have traction control. And so this was pretty early on. This was the early 90s, and traction control might have been on a few like German cars and stuff. And I was like, hey, maybe there's a clever way I can do that. So I took my electronic skills and I figured out this way to use my rev limiter on the engine to rev limit the engine if my back tires started spinning too much, which had some pretty interesting knock-on effects. So I could go in through the corners as fast as I want because I couldn't spin out, basically. It was really hard to spin out because the traction control would just cut the power of the engine if the back tires started to swing out and spin really fast. And the other thing is the traction control system would dump raw fuel into the exhaust as it's like killing the ignition to slow the engine down. So my car would shoot flames out the side, which was really awesome. The fans really liked like this car that.
I don't know why my traction control system doesn't do that. My
Yeah,
car never shoots flames out the side.
Well, I was cheating a little bit. Normally you wouldn't just dump raw fuel out the exhaust to slow the engine down, but it was made the car look really cool. I have some home videos I need to like digitize sometime of like my car shooting these like 5 feet flames out the side.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I did some other fun stuff, like I put fake brake lights on my race car because, you spend your week driving around on the street, and when you're on the racetrack, you don't expect to see brake lights. And this all came about one day because I cracked one of these red glow sticks and just tied it on the back of my race car. And it was just kind of bouncing around. And one of my competitors came over and said, I'm so frustrated with you. That red thing bouncing around, it just made me think brake lights. And I wanted to like hit the brakes all the time. So I'm like, So these dirt cars, like I did some sprint racing, the ones with the funny wings, and I did the ones that look like a wedge of cheese that are all open in the back, the late models. And I put some fake brake lights up underneath where it was only visible to the drivers, and I had a little pendulum that would like bounce back and forth, and it would just randomly turn on when I hit bumps.
Just randomly flip on.
Yeah. And so at this point, I started becoming pretty successful. And I started making so much money. I had British Petroleum sponsoring me partway through this. And I ended up dropping out of high school. I had a trash GPA anyway. So my dad was convinced I was going to be a professional race car driver. And he was contacting his friends in North Carolina to try to get me on a team. And it was kind of an interesting time. And I was like this really kind of bad wild child, like hanging out with all the knuckleheads at the racetrack and doing the goth thing, swearing like a sailor. But I wasn't particularly happy either, right? I was like, this was kind of a pretend thing I was doing to be wild and crazy. And after a while, and after a lot of these things I was doing, like traction control and stuff got banned, and I was under a magnifying glass all the time. I decided, like, I just don't want to do racing anymore. And so I'm in my early 20s, and I go over to one of my friend's house that I went to high school with, and he had made a man cave in his garage, and he had his 486 computer that he built, custom built.
Ooh.
And he's like, I tricked this wholesaler to sell me all the parts wholesale. And so this normally would be like a $1,500 computer, but I got it for like $600. And my entrepreneurial side, I mean, when I was racing cars, I'd been selling cars, I was selling traction control systems and all these things too. So I was really into, selling things.
Figuring out how to turn it profitable and make it your job as well as your hobby.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, wow, that's a lot easier than, getting into fist fights in the pit area. So I'm like, hey, I'll sell off all my racing stuff and let's open a computer store. And so we did that. And we opened a computer store, and it took off. And I was still like this really rough around the edge kid. And me and my business partner were constantly fighting. We were just headbutting all the time. And he ended up booting me out of the business. And so, I lost everything. It was kind of funny. Throughout my career, when I made some of these transitions in my what I'm doing, I'd always go to friends and family and ask them what I should do. So I'd go to my dad, like, what should I do? And he's like, well, it was a good run doing the racing, and it sucks that you got kicked out of your business. Just go back, get a high school diploma, and get your life back on track. And friends would tell me the same thing. But I went back to my apartment, and I was sitting there crying, and then getting mad, and crying, getting mad. And I'm like, fuck that guy. I'm going to put him out of business. And so I scraped up all the pennies I could. I moved out of my apartment. I got my deposit back. And I found just down the street this little tiny closet of a retail space. It was a one-seat barber shop. And just down the road from his business. Unbolted the barber chair and threw it out in the alley. And got enough money to make some store fixtures on the wall. But I didn't have any money for product. So I went down the street to his dumpster and I took all the colorful boxes out of his dumpster, put it all over the walls like I had product. And so, customers would, trickle in. They're like, oh, I want that voodoo video card you have up there. I'm like, well, that one's reserved. But if you give me half now, I'll get you one in a few days. And so
bootstrapping the business.
Yeah, maybe it's not totally ethical, but
it's 20-year-old bootstrapping.
I was living in the back of this space, eating ramen noodles, going over to friends' houses to take showers and stuff like that. It was really rough, so you kind of had to do what you had to do to get off the ground. And but the business really wasn't taking off. But fortunately for me, across the street was an insurance salesman who was kind of a computer fanatic. And he'd come over at lunchtime and he saw that I was starving to death and would bring me lunch, which was greatly appreciated. And he'd sit with me and he's like, there's this thing called relatability. If you're swearing all the time and you're doing wearing Doc Martens and, dark eyeliner, funky colored hair, the average person, I know they're boring, but they're not going to relate to you. So you probably should act the part of what you're trying to do. And I admired him, and so I started to adopt these things and kind of change the way I interact.
Try it and see if it works.
And lo and behold, it worked. It was kind of a funny situation too. I'm still connected to all these angsty kids and stuff that I went to high school with, and they're like, "You're a sellout, man." It was this funny time in my life where I had this duality in my life. During the day, I was trying to be a professional, and then in the evening, I would try to still maintain that wild child mystique. But things started to take off, and I was out for blood, and so I wouldn't be outsold, or I wouldn't be outdone by my ex-business partner. So I would even lose money at times just to make sure I got the sale, because it was revenge.
You're like Amazon at the time, right? Go into the loss and just get the business.
But things took off. It got really exciting. This was 1995 by this point. Windows 95 was out. Everyone was getting AOL disks. Everyone wanted on the internet. And so we started selling computers like crazy. I started turning a profit. I started hiring people, ordering in computer components on big pallets and, breaking them down. It was super exciting time. Expanded into 5 stores.
Wow.
Learned how to hire people, which was really interesting. How to find the right people with the right temperament and that just love what they're doing. And it was a super magical moment. We were, I don't know, we probably had 15 people in the company across all the stores, and we were just very family-like. And so I was riding pretty high through the late 90s. Y2K is coming up. Everyone is upgrading their computers because at midnight everything's going to explode. And, it looked like it was never going to end.
The house might burn down if you have an old computer.
Yeah.
I remember the commercials still, all the freakouts, all the planes crashing, all the people that were afraid to go anywhere. I was like, okay.
Oh my gosh, we were selling so much hardware, and then right after Y2K, the bottom fell out of the market. There was no money left in it. Everyone had upgraded. The competitors like E-Machines and Gateway were selling computers for $299, and no margin left for us. And so we started hemorrhaging money like crazy. And this was kind of an interesting point in my professional career where I learned about extreme transparency with like personnel. I hadn't been around the block enough to know that executives or whatever professionals don't tell employees what the situation is in the company. And I was just like, hey, here's the brutal facts. Like, we're going to be not making payroll in a couple months if we don't do something. And like, if some of you need to go get a more secure job, I won't hold it against you. And some people left, and then the majority of folks rallied around trying to find a way to save the business. It was so heartwarming. We opened a network gaming center that was super fun before broadband was widely available. We were doing satellite installs. We got into cell phones, and everything we did was kind of getting us back, but not enough. And finally, late 2000, I was like, I have had enough. It's not going to go. And so I went to all the managers of the stores, and I said, if you want the stores, they're yours. And if someday down the road you can pay me for the inventory, great. If you can't, great, whatever. And so that's what I did. I just gave it to them with. So 2 of the stores we shut down. 3 of them, they made a go of it. And I just was driving through Canby, Oregon, like a year ago, where I had one of my stores, and it's still open.
Oh, well, that's awesome.
One of them survived.
That is very cool.
I never got my inventory. It's okay. I walked in, actually. I stopped. I'm like, holy cow. And I walked through. I didn't recognize anyone. And actually, the funny thing is my obsession when I had the computer stores was like facing the shelves. Mm-hmm. So I walked in and I was like looking at things, and I just fell right into my routine after like 20 plus years of just like facing the shelf.
Just start working instantly.
They're probably like, who's this crazy woman that came in and just faced our shelves and left? No. So I'm like, again, I went back to like friends, family, and father, and like, what should I do? And they're like, my dad, of course. It was a good run. Get your high school diploma. And this whole time I had been doing electronics as a hobby and gotten pretty advanced. I'd started working with these emulator chips called FPGAs and making circuit boards, and I had all these little circuit boards that did things. And I'm going to try to break into Silicon Valley. That's where the action is. It's been my lifelong dream. And so I started flying down to Silicon Valley with my remaining money and going to all these trade shows and like shaking everybody's hands. Hey, I'm Jeri. You want to take a look at my circuit board? and like, how are you hiring? And I got a lot of interviews. I did dozens of interviews, but they all ended pretty much the same. I'd make it like 1 or 2 interviews in. They'd look at my resume like, oh, super fascinating. You're working on like, you did race cars. You made all these like reference designs. But where'd you go to school? Well, I didn't. But then I was burning through my money. I took a part-time job for minimum wage and arranged with the owner of this business that I'm only going to work part-time and I might just disappear at times to go to Silicon Valley. And I was going back and forth. I couldn't afford plane flights anymore, not very often, so I was taking the Greyhound bus again.
Back to the bus with the creeps.
Yeah. So I get to Silicon Valley, and at this point I can't pay to go to any of these events, so I'm like learning how to coattail into the conferences. Again, maybe not the most ethical, but you got to do what you got to do at times, I guess, to get. I learned like if you look the part, no one questions you, and if you just walk with authority towards the door, you just go right in.
That's usually the case. It's like the guys with the vests that always walk into the places you see on shows. Like you wear a vest and everybody just assumes that you're supposed to be there. You got this bright orange thing on. Everybody thinks you're wearing it for fun.
Yeah. My trick was I had like a binder, like a book binder, like open.
Oh, okay.
And I just like looked like I was like kind of part of something.
Like you're trying to keep track of stuff for them. You gotta check everything.
Yeah. I'd have a badge from some other trade show and just right through the door. I still do that every once in a while. At a trade show we went to recently, I just like, hey, let's go to this exclusive party. I'm like, come on, crew. I took the Till 5 crew. And I'm like, just follow me. Just don't stop. And
just walk.
Barged through the door. I got in, and the rest of my crew were too scared. They stopped at the door.
Oh.
The other guy stopped, and they were like, we're with her. And eventually he's like, go in.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Anyway, so I got this big break. I met this gentleman doing this really cool ultra wideband piece of technology for firefighters. It was really cool. And he's like, met him at a trade show. He's like, you're perfect. Come down, do an interview. Get on a Greyhound bus, go back to Portland, and come back down like a week later. Get down. The same thing happens. They boot me out, cut the interview short. I'm walking out of the building, just down the stairs, and I run into the CEO of the company. He's like, where are you going? I'm like, well, they cut me free. And he's like, well, have you talked to so-and-so on the engineering team yet? I'm like, no, I just talked to whoever. Like, come with me. And so he just pulled me upstairs and put us all in a conference room and did this kind of panel interview, which was super fun. And then unilaterally hired me.
Oh, no.
$12 an hour.
He saw the talent, huh?
$12 an hour, but I took this like, okay, I have a chip on my shoulder, I have a mission, I took it very serious, and all of this going to Silicon Valley, I started to run into mentors down there. So people I met at trade shows, they were like, you could do this, I'll teach you, and had this kind of virtuous loop with them of like, really appreciate what you're doing, and they were giving me their wisdom, and it was awesome. And so took that project serious, did a good job, worked, for every hour that they paid me, I probably worked 2, and got it done. And that was a stepping stone to my next project. And I just did the same thing, and just repeated from startup to startup. And I started to get a collection of engineers with me that were just kind of like this gang that would go around to different startups. And we got this reputation as like, call Jeri if you want to get a tough problem solved quickly. And it was pretty good. I was starting to like not make $12 an hour like a legitimate wage, and it's like it's happening. So I had this big break. A toy company from New York called me, and they'd seen some stuff that I posted online about reverse engineering some of these old Commodore chipsets just for fun. And they wanted to make a Commodore 64 and a joystick that you could plug into your television that had all your favorite games from the 1980s. And so I got talking to them, and they're like, we need a custom chip made that's the entire Commodore 64 on a chip, and we got to do it super cheap so we can sell this thing for $19. Can you do it? And I've always been pretty brave. I just took a deep gulp and said, like, yep, I can do that.
Now I got to figure out how.
Yeah, like, oh my goodness, I've never done it. At the time I didn't realize that it takes longer than a year. We had like actually less than a year to get this particular chip done. And I hadn't realized that chips took longer than a year. So I assembled a little tiny team, like there's, some software folks that knew how to program the old Commodore, and then I did all the electronics. So I took one of these FPGA emulators, started emulating the whole Commodore 64, we got it going. We started running behind schedule. The poor programmers were working with a prototype that couldn't even do color output until 2 weeks before we were going to send the chip off to the foundry, like full bugs and stuff, and we're just like working day and night. But it was a dream come true because the programmers were these fanatical, like, children of the 80s like I was, and it was fine putting 100-hour weeks in or more. And we were just working day and night. And so we were so far behind schedule at this point, the toy company is like, we have to get this stuff manufactured in July, it has to go on a boat in August, and it has to be through customs and in the warehouses before Thanksgiving or we're screwed. So they did a thing called a super hot lot where they just ran millions of dollars of chips without even testing them. They didn't make a test chip. Super nervous at this point. They built these things. A few weeks later, I get this like angry phone call from this executive at this toy company, angry New Yorker, just swearing at me, you're going to destroy my company, the chips didn't work. He's like, you're getting on a plane tomorrow, going to China and fixing this. And I'm like, I don't even have a passport. Right? I haven't even been out of the United States at this point. And he's like, I don't care. We're flying you to San Francisco. You're doing 1-day passport, and then you're getting on a plane and going to China. I literally considered, should I run to Mexico and hide from this guy? I just lost this guy millions of dollars, and he's so mad. And so Anyway, I go to China. We get there. They open up one of the pilot run units, and the Chinese factory had cost reduced my design without notifying me. They'd taken a bunch of parts out because they'd removed them from my sample board I sent over, and it still worked. So obviously we don't need those parts.
You've gotta love that.
Yeah, they didn't realize they made the thing super unstable. And anyway, this goes back to the ham radio guys, electronics guys. They're like, whenever you have trouble with electronics, just put your finger on things and see what happens. And so I put my finger on the chip or parts around the chip, and it boots up, and I'm like, oh, thank God. Well, anyway, they made the changes. They got it going. I hung out in China while they made these changes. And another kind of bad thing happened when I was in the factory. Like I was naive to the toy industry at this point. I didn't realize that there's like an age rating on this stuff, and neither did any of the folks I was working with doing the programming for it. So we put extras into the joystick. There's Easter eggs, and the programmers put like this kind of violent game where you jump off of a cliff and you like smash your head into the rocks below. You got higher points if you like crack your skull open. There's pictures of us drinking beer with a famous programmer and stuff. And so I'm at the factory and I wiggle the joystick in a particular way to drop into this menu. And one of the toy guys was there. He's like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, we added some extras. Ha ha ha." And he's like, "This is bad. This is so bad." And so by the time I got back to the States, angry toy executive is like leaving messages on my answering machine like, "You're through in the toy industry. You screwed us over," and calling me and just like no.
Oh man.
Oh man. And so the guy I was dating at the time, he was a web expert, and so he's like, we got talking. He's like, "Well, you're done in the toy industry. You might as well just tell the world what you did, or let it leak out." And he convinced me, like, "Yeah, just leak this to the world." And I'm like, "Okay." So he made this fake blog that was supposedly a Chinese factory worker that was into hacking toys, and he backdated all kinds of like little hacks that he did.
Oh.
And he made this blog, and then of course the last one was this Commodore joystick and how to open it and hook disk drives up to it and all the extra Easter eggs in it, and somehow got it on the front of Slashdot back when Slashdot was a thing. And this was like 4 or 5 days before they are going to release this thing on the world. And it starts going viral. I didn't know anything about viral at the time, and so they kicked this thing off. It was being sold first through the Home Shopping Network.
Oh.
QVC. A very weird place to be selling it. And they had the stupidest commercials for it, like trying to sell it to grandma to give to the grandkids.
I can imagine, yeah.
Look at the colors. Your grandkids love this thing called video games. And anyway, so the thing goes for sale at like midnight and starts selling like gangbusters. And so they'd forgotten to take me off of a mailing list with the QVC folks, so I was getting these real-time updates of how many they're selling. And so I'm seeing these like email threads go by of like, what the fuck is going on? Like, how did we sell like 20,000 of them in 1 hour at midnight? And then there's like these back and forths with QVC, like, you don't understand what's going on. 50% of these things are going like overseas. We're not marketing these things overseas. And boom, they like sell out in no time. And then this toy exec calls me up a few days later, like, "Hey kiddo, I know that was you. Way to go." And, like, total change of heart. Like, they like loved me.
You went from tanking the business to saving it.
He still calls me kiddo today. Like, he's one of my advisors, and I reach out to him all the time, and we're like on good terms. But that was tense, like a tense 2 or 3 weeks of like him being mad and me like fucking up bad.
Yeah, that's crazy, especially back to back with the chips happening right before that. And,
yeah.
And that redesign thing, I just want to mention, like, when I worked at Intel, we had the same thing happen. We had switches, like, one set's good, one set randomly resets every week. Don't know why. Can't figure out why. A couple months later, find out, oh, one of the factories decided we don't need these components. We can save some money. So we redesigned it. Like, oh, yeah. Giant
Happens all the
disaster.
time. that, it's interesting. The New York Times got wind of me, and this reporter John Markoff came out. I was living in this little tiny farmhouse in Oregon, just loving doing all this remote work for startups, and it was a great life. And the toy thing was awesome, and it was really cool to see that we sold so many of those things. And I was starting to line up some other toy projects, which was exciting. But Markov comes out and does this. He's like, I'm going to do a little tiny column thing on because your story's kind of interesting. So he comes out and we talk, and I'm telling these crazy ass stories about racing and living in a small town and stuff like that. And then I was flying out to New York for the next toy design, and I'm sitting on a plane, and there's a guy sitting next to me at the New York Times, with a giant picture of me on it, and this big spread and this whole story. I'm like, holy. And the guy I'm like, can I take a look at that real quick? And he's like, wait.
That's awesome.
That was really awesome, and so I do my thing in New York. I come back, and my answering machine is full of messages from my father. It starts off something like this. It's like, I don't know what's going on. I hope you're okay, but people are calling me looking for you. And then the next message is okay, I interrogated one of them. I understand what's going on. Apparently there's some newspaper article. I'm going to go buy the newspaper. And the next message is something like, wow, kid, that's great. Congratulations. But this is early internet. I didn't have any social media and hardly any presence, and people were trying to get a hold of me. And back when people read newspapers, and kind of put me, on the map, which is kind of cool. And from there, but anyway, to try to speed the story up a bit, this is where things get really interesting, and I start to learn a lot about how to make consumer products that appeal to certain audiences and even broad audiences. So working with the toy guys, and I did a half dozen toys with various toy companies, they have it down to a science, and they taught me you need to know your audience. And actually, kind of an interesting story. In the toy industry, you can pitch your own toy designs, and if you get picked up, then you get a back-end royalty, and you can become very wealthy off this. So people in the toy industry are pitching toys all the time, and there's these pitch competitions and things. And so I got a chance to pitch to one of the companies I work with. So I made the Nerd's Nerd toy. It had displays and lights and all kinds of stuff. And you and I would love this thing. It's 50 people in the world would love it, right? So I go pitch it to this room of toy executives, and they almost had me at tears. They were so harsh. They were, and I'm moping around the halls afterward, so rude at me. And one of them took me to the side and here, let me tell you how it is. This is where you messed up. You didn't come in and tell us who the audience is. You didn't tell us the value proposition. You didn't tell us how you were going to create a box that within 5 seconds of a kid walking up to this, they know exactly what the experience is. You didn't, explain, the profit margins, and really, working with them on these things, I got a lot better at understanding the audience, and they taught me little tricks of how to get into the right mindset. So if you're targeting a 12-year-old girl or a 14-year-old boy or something like that, you have to mentally role play that you're that audience, even though you're not, right? And they're if you have to get Hot Wheel cars and just play on the ground with Hot Wheel cars to get into that mental state, that's what you got to do, and then design your toy. And so that stuck with me through my career, and it's been very helpful. I did some pretty interesting projects. I did a Bratz laptop type toy that, they sold 10 million of these things. Kind of a dreadful toy, but, yeah.
Hey, it was popular though. It was what the kids actually wanted to buy. Getting into that mindset.
I wish I had pitched that one. I wouldn't be sitting here today chasing after an AR dream. I'd probably be retired or something. But anyway, but working on those projects were great, and then I went off to do a ton of things. I worked on chips that went into the TiVo. Worked on navigation systems for low Earth orbit rockets. Video editing gear, just all kinds of things. When I was doing all the video editing stuff, I was working with a company called Newtek, which is a pretty famous company. They made a PC version of basically what was called the video poster back in the day, which was super famous. And helped them on that. And this was early, like 2007 or 8 or something, when the streaming was super new. No one knew anything about it, and YouTube was super new. And so we built this box, and I'm like, well, I should learn about video streaming. I did a bunch of crazy things, like streamed my hardware lab 24 hours a day and just let the internet tune in and type on a chatbot to me. And
Oh, cool.
crazy. Yeah, and then I started doing YouTube videos, and at this point I had so many mentors that helped me. I'm like, oh, maybe I can do little YouTube videos that are kind of my way to give back. And so showed people on YouTube how to like do everything from kind of art projects. Like I made a bass guitar out of a Commodore 64 and it played through the actual sound chip. Making your own semiconductors in a garage, so how to go get like all the chemicals and diffusion furnaces and making transistors and chips and stuff. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was fun. I was just doing it for fun, and that's where Valve comes in. So it's maybe 2011 or something, or 10, I don't remember. And I collect pinball machines, and I had become a little bit more well known in like the maker community. So Maker Fair was an event that happened all the time. And I'd go to these different events, and these weird Valve people would come up to me. So I'd be at a pinball like event playing pinball, and like this person like slinks up to me playing the pinball next to me, like, "Hey, you're Jeri, right? We've been trying to get a hold of you. We're from Valve. We really want to work with you." I'm like, I don't think I'm going to want to go work for a software company. I don't think you guys have what it takes to do hardware. And I'm just pushing them away for like 6 months. I show up at Maker Fair. They're sending me like social media messages. And finally Gabe Newell like reaches out to me on some social media. And he's like, "Hey, it's Gabe. I want to fly down to Portland and take you out to lunch." I'm like, "Okay, I'll go to lunch with you."
Fair enough. It'd be a hard one to turn down for just about anybody. At least anybody who knows who Gabe is.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've been cyclical in my like video gaming career. Like, I was totally into Counter-Strike and playing, those games. But, as I'd gotten really busy doing YouTube videos and, my more professional career, I stopped playing a lot of video games. I'd occasionally like whip out an old retro game or something. But I wasn't on Steam at the time even. So it's like, so I'm just doing like quick lookups of like, yeah, Valve. They made a couple video games. And I didn't even like really connect Steam. I'd known it's Steam, but I didn't connect the two, even when I'm pushing them away. So Gabe comes down, and I probably look like a total idiot as I'm talking to him because I know very little about the company, and I'm like with complete conviction saying like, software companies don't have what it takes to do hardware. And he's like, "I think you're the right person. Come up to Valve. It's not an interview. I'll fly you up to spend an afternoon with us. And I just want to show you around." So I'm like, "Okay, I'll do that." I fly up there. They take me to their facility. I'm like, it's cool, right? They're taking me around all the cabals and there's video games being made. And I'm like, this is neat. Like, I've always been a huge fan of video games. And so they put me in a conference room, and back to the panel interview stuff. There's like, I don't know, 10 people in there, and it was a lie. It was totally an interview. So it's like this rapid fire. Like, "You're going to make a joystick. How do you do it?" I'm like, "Oh, I'll just go to Tainan and work with this supplier, and we'll use these materials." And it's like easy stuff. Kind of throw me a hard question. And then I didn't say that actually, but it was super fun. And anyway, Gabe must have did a no signal or something, and like just a bunch of people got up and left. And Gabe's like, "Come with me," and he takes me down to the 4th floor of the building. He's like, "This whole floor is yours, and this is, if you accept the job, this is what I want you to do." It's like there's a problem in video games right now. There's all video game players in different silos, and they rarely like cross over. And then there's non-gamers. It's a big opportunity. We can get more people into enjoying video games. He's like, "I want you to come up with a way to bring the entire family together and bring Valve into the living room." And at this time, Valve was being threatened by Microsoft because they were doing the new Metro interface on Windows 8. And it was, if it took off, Valve would not be able to have Steam on the Windows platform. And so they were looking at this also as they may be edged out of the Windows platform. And they'd already lost the phone wars. They regretted that they had never like became a de facto platform on phones when they could have.
I remember those times when the UWP stuff was coming out and they were trying to like everything was going to be some app through Microsoft's store tied in with the phone.
Yeah.
I'm glad that didn't stay around.
Yeah, I don't know. They must have had like a huge echo chamber in their testing, you know, efforts because like even the interface was like really I didn't understand like why they thought it was compelling, but that's a different story.
Yeah, echo chambers are common everywhere. I think in development, something you got to watch out for.
Yeah, and so anyway, Gabe's like, "Come on, stay the night. Come back tomorrow. I want to introduce you to more folks." And it was pretty late in the day at the point. And I'm like, "Well, I didn't bring any clothes or anything. Can I just go home and come back another day?" He's like, "Just stay the night. Like, are you doing anything tomorrow?" I'm like, "I can change my plans, I guess." He's like, "We'll fix you up." So, the office manager, you know, takes me down to the swag room and gives me, I think it was a Left 4 Dead shirt or something, at the swag room, and then takes me out to buy like toiletries and underwear and stuff. Put me up in a really nice hotel and like took me out to dinner and like started, pouring on the alcohol and stuff and telling me how wonderful I am. It's like you're making my head swell.
Of course.
And I came back the next day, like wearing a Valve shirt, and I don't know where Gabe was. He never even showed up. I just like showed up at Valve and I just wandered the building all day. I'm like,
Huh.
and occasionally people, the word had got out that they needed to try to recruit me. So lots of people were coming up like, "Jeri, hope you join. Hope you join." Like, oh God damn it! I'm in the middle of a project. Like, I'll do it after the project. We started having discussions. I'm like, I can do it part-time. I can help you get going part-time. Love the mission. This is exactly what I'm into, like bringing people together and selling 100 million or something. And so lots of crazy things. Like they were pushing so hard to get me into the project. They're like, well, maybe we can go to the company you're working with and just pay them cash to let you go. And I'm like, I have never abandoned a project. I will not do that. Like, I will work my ass off for you, but I have to finish this project. Anyway, that's how this got started. And then I started recruiting like a dream team into Valve. So we got like the best like product people and makers and researchers. And Gabe gave us kind of unlimited budget. And so we started getting equipment. We built a whole machine shop with just the finest tools and all the best test equipment. And we started doing all this research on how can we make games more approachable and more fun. And we were doing things like we went out and bought like super expensive military grade, VR systems and AR systems and very expensive like these medical high-speed trackers that track scalpels, and we're hooking these to headsets. Like, is it going to be VR? Will that do it? And like, let's just spend as much money as possible to see what the experience is like in the future. And did all kinds of fun experiments with AR, and that's where I got the bug for AR. When I started seeing AR, I'm like, this really solves the problem of making approachable, gaming system. So that was kind of the area of my focus. We were hooking electrodes to people to read their brain waves and feeding that back into the director of like Left 4 Dead, and we like found interesting ways where we get these feedback loops to make the games more engaging. Also, kind of opened my eyes to ethics in engineering. As we started, for instance, we started researching like, can we get more engagement in a game? And then I started reading papers from the casino industry. Engagement is same thing as addiction. So also got me thinking for the first time in my career of like, just because you can do things doesn't mean you necessarily should, because we found some interesting stuff. You can really get people hooked on stuff if you can understand their emotions.
Yeah, that's like a whole industry in dark science, I feel like, on its own. A whole bunch of people that just focus on that. And yeah, it's one of the things that's always scared me when making games. Like, I want to make sure that I'm just working on making stuff that's fun and interesting, but try not to force the addiction in there, or at least try not to scientifically add it in. I've seen it be pushed a couple times.
Yeah, Valve's a really cool place. There's a lot of things I liked about the environment. They're when you join Valve, there's no managers, so they tell you things like, always think about the customer and do the right thing for the customer. That's like a great mission. And then always do the right thing for Valve. And, they give you a lot of, they expect you to be adults when you join the company, which isn't necessarily the case. But,
It's never always the case, but it's a great ideal, and it's what I like to strive for, or what I hope everybody will strive for.
I found the games industry radically different than, say, toy industry or chip design, or it's like, there's, anyway, that's a long story. They're not always the most mature people there. But anyway, they give you all this latitude, and it's awesome. We were just out there researching, and like, for instance, on the ethical stuff, like, Valve had tons of psychologists on board, like, researching, the psychology of loot boxes and, variable reward on this or that, or, what happens if the game's not balanced. And it was pretty interesting having all those resources around Valve and learning from them. And I'm glad that Valve, in general, tries to do the right thing.
Yeah, that seems to be at least the goal. Like, it's always good to have.
And they mess up a lot, but so anyway, we started like doing all these experiments. I get hooked on AR. The first time I saw Dota 2, a spectator mode on Dota 2 on the table.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, just watching esports, which was, Valve was just getting into doing the Dota International, and it's like, okay, it's actually going to be a big thing for Valve and like the whole world. Like, man, having the situational awareness of seeing the whole map and seeing some like character sneaking around the backside that the announcer doesn't even see yet, it was just like really heightened the experience. And like, I don't know anything about Dota gameplay, but I'm excited watching this.
Yeah, it's really cool. I've seen a little bit of that. I haven't seen one on your device, obviously, but I've seen them in VR, and even there it was really great just watching like the whole battle, being able to have this top-down God view that's very different from a flat 2D view.
I'm so excited about esports on our system because it's going to be really cool. Not only can you see your friends, you can see your beer, you can see the television or monitor, you can actually see your favorite streamer commentating the action. You can see the whole map just like popping out of the table for you. It's going to be spectacular.
Yeah, that is really cool.
I got a taste of that about 12 years ago at Valve, and it's just like, this is the effing future. Like, and so we started dividing out into groups of who's going to start to productize things. So there was a group that was excited about VR. I like VR a lot. I mean, this is amazing being able to synthesize like anything you want in your world, but I have a hard time seeing how it brings the family together, and it's like a big mass market product. AR was awesome, obviously, and then we had folks working on the Steam box, which was, I was watching that from the sidelines, reminding them of 3DO. Like, you guys are going to do another 3DO. Remember your history, which is kind of where it turned out.
Yeah.
And then also, I helped with a lot of the input devices too, like the game controllers, and kind of exited stage left when they started working on their Steam controller. It had the 2 touch pads. I didn't think it was quite the right direction.
I think I still have one of those unopened. I have one sitting in there that I used, and then the other one I don't think ever actually got opened. Because it's like, oh, okay, this was fun, and I don't know how I'm going to use it again because I still want to play on my computer.
Yeah, exactly. That was an interesting project. That was one of the first ones that I worked on before, really focusing on AR. So we were doing all kinds of controllers and motion controllers too. So that, like, way ahead of everybody else, we were like, motion controllers would be pretty awesome for like AR and VR stuff. But on the game controller side, it was interesting. So we were doing touch pads. We were doing like, can we do better analog sticks? We were doing Hall effects joysticks. We were doing force feedback on the actual joystick itself. The one that I liked the most, and actually play tested really well, this is so bad, we called it the reach around. It was a giant marble trackball that extended through an Xbox-style looking game controller. There's pictures of this online. I love that they posted this. But you could touch the back, the reach-around part. And for looking, you could flick the ball with your finger, and you could do, stop the ball really fast. Mm-hmm. And so we were using Counter-Strike, CS:GO training course to test the different controllers. So have like a random person come through, you use WASD and a mouse, see how fast they can go, run through a bunch of times, get their best time, and then have them use each of the controllers a ton of times and see how close they could get to their keyboard and mouse. And that one always came out on top as like really close to a keyboard.
Interesting. I have to check that thing out.
Yeah, it got nixed because it was kind of ugly. And so, yeah, industrial designers, have a lot of sway in products too. And so even if you have a wonderful product, if it doesn't like appeal, it's not going to make it.
Yeah, people have to want to pick it up and buy it, take it home.
Yeah, even with a fantastic name, I don't know. But then I moved on to AR and started working on 6-stop motion control, doing AR experiences, and it was really magical. Like the AR projects attracted the most attention, especially when we had visitors, because it was like the first time we could use a wand type device and pick things up and move it. We had this amazing magic wand that I built that had a telescoping antenna where the tracker part of it came out. So you could be sitting there doing something up close, but I need to reach across the table, so it's like you reach over and tap the table. And
oh, cool!
I still think that's a pretty good experience. Maybe someday I'll make a extending wand control
and be an add-on.
And then, so the whole Tilt 5 technology came about by accident. So I was trying to do AR like everybody else. We were doing waveguides, we were doing refractors, reflectors, bird bath, waveguides. We just had it all there. And I had an optics bench set up one day that had this big optical system and a projection system and a little beam splitter that put the light into my eyes. And of course, I was only getting a HoloLens teeny tiny size image. And one day I was reconfiguring it, and I put a beam splitter in backwards and projected out into the room. One of my colleagues was doing a laser bounce experiment for tracking and had a piece of this retroreflective material on the wall, and I saw a beautiful image 30 feet away. I'm like, one of my colleagues was doing a laser bounce experiment for tracking. Looked at it for a while. A piece of this retroreflective material. Okay, and then moved on. It's a beautiful image. And then months go on. I'm still trying to crack the problem of how are we going to solve this AR issue. In the meantime, Google Glass comes out, and people are panicked over Google Glass, it's announced, and it's going to be garbage. Well, I shouldn't say it should be garbage. I actually thought it would be interesting if marketed correctly, but it's not a threat for what we're doing. And a lot of weird things started happening in the hardware group, so everyone started really digging into their own little projects, and the VR group started bringing Oculus through all the time, which was really pissing off a bunch of people in the hardware lab, because Carmack and the Oculus founders would come through, and Abrash, who was heading up the VR stuff, was giving away all of our secrets. We had discovered low latency displays, we had all these tracking tricks and ways to make the images look better, and calibrating these systems. And half the team was what the F are you doing? You're giving away, we have to build a product, that's our mission, and you're giving it away to this external company. And
to the competition.
Yeah, and so that, to their credit, their take on it, or at least what they were telling us, is well, if we help them out, obviously they're going to put their headset on Steam, and then everyone wins. And the more pessimistic folks like me and others were yeah, I don't know. What if they build a Steam themselves? Isn't that the goal? And this happened time and time again. And actually, I was the designated demo giver in the hardware lab. So every time Carmack came through, I was forced to give him all the demos. And there was these funny situations where I'm showing him an AR project and showing him a wand or a motion controller, and he's I don't know. I think that people are just going to want to sit on the couch and use an Xbox controller. I'm no, that's spatial things, like moving things around. That's the magic. That's what people are going to be drawn to. He's like, no. Many months later, when Oculus came out, and then HTC Vive came out right behind it with like motion controllers versus an Xbox controller, I'm like, yeah, I told you. Anyway, like things got really tense in the company, and there was a bunch of infighting going on. And this is where Valve breaks down. Since there's no management, everyone is incentivized to recruit people onto your team, and so you have to pitch your project and try to draw resources off of other projects. And they also have the stack ranking thing where you get big, huge bonuses. Like, so you want to do good on your stack ranking. And so people are always like cautious about moving from one project to another, and what's it going to look like if I move around, and it's going to screw up my stack ranking, and I'm not going to get my hundreds of thousands of dollars bonus. And so you're out lobbying, trying to get people to come over. You're not getting like everyone to come over, and then there's like the VR group, and you're lobbying to them like, no, you should be over here, and that's pissing off like the lead of VR, and so they're snaking you. And it got to the point where I went to lunch with Gabe one day. He actually sat right next to me. That's how Gabe signals to the company like what he thinks is most important in the company. He doesn't dictate anything. He's like, if I hang out in a cabal, I think that's an important thing to do. So anyway, I take him out to lunch, and I'm like, I don't get Valve. Like, I am getting beat up left and right. People are like brain sucking me, and then like claiming that they did something when it was actually our team doing things. It's like, this is so toxic. Like, is there something you can do? And he's like, Jeri, I have a piece of advice for you. All the best projects around here have been led by 2 or 3 people with arrows sticking out of their back. So just keep doing what you're doing if you believe in it. I like Gabe a lot, but he's rough around the edges, and that's not the answer I was looking for.
I can imagine. It wasn't consoling enough.
Yeah. For all the good things in the Valve culture, there's like an equal number of like toxic things that can get in the way. And anyway, that same year, like Valve has this like company vacation. It's ludicrous. They fly out friends and family to Hawaii for a week, and they put you up in luxury, and the whole company comes to a halt. And so I'm there, and he's like, Jeri, stand up. He's doing some kind of announcement. Jeri, stand up. And he's like, she's the most important hire Valve's ever made. And I'm like, great, things are going to turn around for me after I get back. And I've like, got an endorsement from Gabe to everybody. Like 4 or 5 months later, they fired me and the entire AR project. So there was like this whole groundswell and this like lobbying, like they aren't a cultural fit. And out we go. And it was the weirdest layoff I've ever seen in my life. Normally, they just cut your card key and tell you you're done and you're out.
You meet them in the parking lot and find out everybody can't get back in the door.
Yeah, things like that. They intercept you at the door. Anyway, I show up to work. I'm at the elevator, and one of the mechanical engineers is storming out with like veins popping out of his head, and he's like, did you hear what they did to Ed? They fired him today. I'm like, what? That's my mechanical engineer. So I go upstairs, and there's like a team meeting going on, and then there's a bunch of like 8 or 9 people sitting around like moping. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And we were all getting fired. You guys are getting fired, and they're like, you are too. Like, what? I was just the most important hire. Oh my god. Anyway, it was like Abrash and the rest of the engineering team like off in a meeting room, like saying like, this is, the message was like, this is good, those people don't fit, and they're better off. The thing is, I heard what was said in it, it's like, they're better off outside Valve. They're having a hard time. They're better off outside Valve.
Well, that's a nice way to put it, huh?
Yeah. Some people just don't fit in Valve, and like those 8 people don't. And
So the whole team's
anyway,
gone, huh?
Yeah, so we're sitting around all day waiting for our turn to go find out like why we're getting fired. And so they have this thing in Valve, which I really like actually. So it's really hard to get hired by Valve, and a lot of times you get to the end of the interview panel and you can't make a decision, right? They're not a cultural fit, or they didn't do well on the Left 4 Dead scoring problem or something. And whoever brought them in can advocate for them. And you can put like basically a token down, like, I will take care of this person if they don't work out. And if they don't work out, you have to be the person to let them go. And so it was my turn to get let go. I get the message, like, go to Gabe's, private room upstairs, and go up there, and then there's like a lawyer and an HR person and Gabe. And I was like preparing all day. We went out to lunch and drank a bunch, and I'm mad, and I'm gonna give him an earful, and I walk in the door and I'm like aggressive for like 5 seconds. I'm like, wow, so this is it, Gabe? And then I like immediately start getting weepy, and I'm like having all the range of emotions, and he gives me a little pep talk of like, I'll always be a fan, is basically what he said. And you're too abrasive to work here. Okay. All right. And as I was kind of walking out, I'm like, Gabe, you should just sell me the AR project because it's dead. Like, you just got rid of the whole AR project. And he's like, okay. I guess I didn't mention up to this point, and this is when I discovered this retroflector is awesome for making AR projects. And even though the prototypes were crude, people were coming down and hanging out in the AR lab for like hours playing these really dumb games, but they were really fun because they were multiplayer.
Nice. And this was on that same reflective material you accidentally discovered?
Yeah, it was crude in the early days. And in fact, my detractors, like Abrash, he actually called it, it's gravel for the eyes, which I always thought was funny. I'm like, dude, it's a prototype. But anyway.
So he approved to sell it to you, or what ended up happening there?
So I ran back downstairs, and there were still some folks around the office, and I started gathering people up. I'm like, Gabe's going to sell me the AR project. Do you want to do this? And so a group of us like, yeah, this is magic. Let's do this. Let's start a company. And an interesting thing, at the same time, the HR department was getting me trying to get me to sign an exit agreement where I couldn't say anything disparaging about Valve. And of course, throughout the day, everyone's talking about their exit package. And so they told me on the way out of Gabe's office what the exit package was, and it's a fraction of what most other people were getting. So I was a little, like, insulted by that. It was still decent, but still, like, why did this person get, like, 3x of what I'm getting? So I'm like, I'm not signing this. And they're like, yeah, but it's free money. I'm like, I'm not signing this. And I think maybe at the time I was thinking, well, maybe they'll like come back and counteroffer or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they'll give you what everybody else is getting. Like, okay, like maybe she'll sign it for triple.
I don't know. It's a crazy day. I don't know exactly what was going through my mind, and it was pretty interesting that I did that. I'm glad I did. So now I can talk about Valve from my perspective. I'm sure a lot of people in Valve disagree because they've had different experiences, but it's my story. I get to share it, and I'm not like gagged by opinions of an exit agreement. And also, at the same time as I was rallying the team, and people were like, yeah, let's do it. And we took all, people had already started pilfering our offices, like oscilloscopes were gone, and they're just like taking things.
All the hardware that's about to get thrown away.
Yeah. It's like, I didn't know how long it was going to take to get back and get the prototypes. So we found this closet, and we moved the entire AR lab into this like secret closet and hid it behind a bunch of boxes because we didn't want them to take and format our computers or so basically for $100 in the end, and a lot of negotiating with lawyers who were also trying to push me to sign the exit agreement. Kudos to Gabe, who through all of this back and forth with exit agreements and stuff said just do it, sell it to her. Ended up selling it to us for $100. Let us take all of the computers, prototypes, just like thousands and thousands of dollars. We were just set up to go
nice.
at this point. It's pretty amazing.
Just trying to support it. It seemed like he felt like you had something eventually, and you were going to do it, and wanted to
Well, he
support
had
that.
never looked at it. That was the weird thing.
Oh, really?
So years later, just a few years ago, Gabe came out. He got to take a look at it, and his response was like, "Wow, this is what you were talking about all those years ago." And he's like, "I've never had this kind of level of presence in an AR project before. This is really good." I'm like, "Yeah, I told you."
Yeah.
Anyway, it's so funny. It's like, so the last day of Valve, I had taken all my pinball machines. I'm a pinball collector, so I had dozens of pinball machines spread out through Valve. I'm like, fuck you guys, you can't play my pinball machines for free anymore. So I went and I shut them all down and folded down all the head boxes. And I took one picture, got fired today, and put it on Twitter. And some rumors had started getting out to the press. Of course, all the press is reaching out to me like, you got fired. Well, you were so publicly like acclaimed as like this wizard that they hired to run the hardware lab. Tell us all about it. So in the middle of all these negotiations, like, yeah, I'll tell you what Valve's like. Here it is. Like, and so as I'm just like telling my story of what it was like at Valve, like I was getting these messages. It was like 50-50 from people inside Valve, like, what are you doing? How could you do this? And my response back is like, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Like it's, you know there's bad things there. And then the other 50% was like, kudos. The story needed to get out there a long time ago. Maybe it's going to affect some change in the company. I hope it did, honestly.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully things are better now than before. Yeah.
I think Valve's always striving to improve. So in my mind, I think it did. So then a few months later, Abrash took the VR team jump ship to Oculus after giving them all the technology. Oculus raised money off of all Valve hardware. We installed a marker PTAM room, we called it, in their offices, and they ran all the venture capitalists through it and raised like tons of money, and then flipped it to Facebook. And so I can only imagine that Abrash moved all his people over there a few weeks before and got a huge payout. So I'm still really bitter about that. And then afterwards, at least, folks high up in Valve, including, Gabe, is like, sorry what happened to you. Like, we have more, like, understanding of what's going on. And so, anyway, Abrash wasn't wrong. I think that, I'm in a better place not being in Valve.
Yeah, it seems like it has turned into a pretty big success from what I've seen so far. So you guys split off into the new company, and did that immediately become this company, or was there another phase in between?
No. So this is like 8 years ago. And so I didn't know anything about running a venture-backed company. So a group of us from Valve formed this company and didn't know what we were doing. We were scared. I was too scared to be the CEO and leave the company. So we immediately went out and hired a kind of startup CEO, kind of scrappy startup CEO, who was not too bad. We raised some money, got the product off the ground. We went to events and showed people, got people excited about it. We actually did a Kickstarter campaign. We did quite well with that. And then we moved the company from Seattle down to Silicon Valley. And then we raised money from Andy Rubin. And so, Andy Rubin's been in the news lately, but we didn't know any of that back then. Anyway, he infused like $15 million into the company at this point. And he's like, this is amazing. You're going to the moon with it. Like, he's a moonshot guy, right? Yeah. And so he immediately, and his team, started having trouble with our kind of scrappy startup CEO. And they're like, he's out. And they started bringing in like Zynga executives and Disney executives, Sony executives, and they started like injecting these people in our company who then hired the buddies, who then started hiring a bunch of people, bought game studios out of Salt Lake City, and next thing I know, in no time, we were like 90 people. And they had taken me and like pat me on the head and stuck me in a corner and like, just sit back, we're going to the moon. And just a huge crater in the ground just burned through the money faster than you can imagine. And so I'm sitting there by myself in an empty office. All the executives exit stage left. Now I'm holding this like defunct company, having to figure out how to shut it down and sell the assets. And like, what the F happened? Again, emotional, like sitting there. There's a picture of me of like our last day party, like no executives there, just the core team. I'm like crying, couldn't control myself, super emotional. Anyway, I'm sitting in an empty office and I get this random phone call, and I'm like, hello. It's like, hey, it's Nolan. I'm like, Nolan who? Nolan Bushnell, founder of Atari. I'm like, oh my goodness, like, how'd you get my number? Like, he's like, I called around, I got your number. I got to see your tech at some event. It's magical. Like, this is going to be big. I just wanted to call you and say, like, I saw this coming a mile away, and here's my piece of advice. Like, you need to run the company. You need to figure out how to fix this thing. There's always a way. Can't tell you how, but go figure it out. And I'm like, could it be true? Like, so I reached out to all my mentors and advisors, and I'm like, I just had this embarrassing, like, crash and burn of, like, $15 million of somebody else's money. And they're all like, yeah, that's Silicon Valley for you. Like, just spin it positive. Like, you learned a lot, right? I'm like, yeah, I learned a lot. It's like, figure out how to buy the assets and go forward. So for the second time, I had my dream ripped away and then bought it again. I'm insane. I'm stupid. Like, and so a group of us, I called up like the best people on the team, and like, we could do this. Like, do you want to do it? And they echoed the sentiment, like, you got to leave the company. We've always had the vision of what it should be, and that's the only way we're going to do it. So we pooled our money, like taking life savings and like pushing it on the table and buying assets. It was super painful and scary. And bought the assets at a liquidation and started again. And this time, though, we didn't rush into it. We didn't just go in blindly. We sat around and we talked to a lot of people and analyzed what went wrong. And we figured out a few things. One of the things that went wrong at Castellar, the previous company, is we were trying to boil the ocean. It was in the middle of this big hype cycle, and AR was going to do everything for everyone, and we adopted that message. And our system, although it's good for education and data visualization and medical and tons of things, you end up making the wrong decisions in your product, whether you, how you market it, what the features you put in. So we thought about what audience we wanted to go after. We did the whole persona thing. We just spent all this time, figured it out, and narrowed the focus to just something that we felt was really solid and that we could market to an audience. And then we started working on it, and then this was a chance for Jamie, my co-founder, to do some of these things we've been dreaming about for years, like this asynchronous thing I was telling you about, so that you could asynchronously connect to the game engine, and it was independent of frame rate. And so he started working on that. I got busy raising money, which, as much as my advisor said that it is a benefit to crash a company, it's not. It took a lot of work. And it's not easy raising money as a female founder in Silicon Valley. Only 2% of the money in Silicon Valley goes to female founders. So there's definitely biases and problems for female founders. But hundreds of pitches, got money, got some money from some really interesting partners that helped us get to the next phase. And we were always like, actually one of my advisors, he's like, you're CEO now. Do you know what that stands for? I'm like, I know what CEO stands for. He's like, I don't think you do. Stands for Cash Extraction Officer. That's what you have to do all the time. Like, that's your primary job. 120% of the time, the other 120% of the time, you can do fun stuff like engineering, but that's it. So, pre-order your units now.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody should. If you
End
haven't
of the
already
summer.
throughout this thing, I would highly recommend it.
But yeah, we were within like weeks of going out of business multiple times, and I was just hustling, raising money so that the team could keep building the prototypes. And then we got a good prototype, and then we started going to events, and we got to the point where we couldn't raise any more money. All the investors were saying, you need to have product market fit. Love you, love your story, we're inspired, but we need a proof point. And we'd always said we're never doing a Kickstarter again. But everyone's telling you got to do a Kickstarter. You got to prove that there's a market for this thing. And so it was an all chips on the table moment for us. We went out to all these trade shows. We took all the money in the bank for marketing, which was not much. And we did the largest ever AR project on Kickstarter, with all the sales and then all the add-ons. It was like over $2 million in 30 days. And then from there, we were able to raise $7.5 million, like half of what we did at Cast AR. And we've been able, with that $7.5 million, we set up manufacturing, got supply chain fixed, survived COVID, built factory robots because we can't go to the factory. Acquired games, one of the things that we never did at Cast AR, one of the dumbest things that our leaders were doing, so they're just like, we're going to build a piece of hardware and everyone will come. So we dedicate money to developers that have interest in games, and we've made this really nice tight package that really resonates with people, and it's really satisfying now. We're shipping units, we're going to shows, people are getting their units, and we're seeing all the feedbacks, like, it's better than I expected, and it's like, oh my God.
That's what I heard from everybody at the shows. At GDC, the line was huge, and everybody that I saw come out of there was excited about it, talking about how much better it was than they thought it would be. And it's hard to see, like, from the outside, if you're just watching somebody else until you put them on. It's really hard to grasp the actual depth that you're getting there and just how smooth the whole experience is.
It's really flattering. We go to these events, and we often end up with like a 30-minute line to get in. It usually starts out the same at every event. Like, there's no one in the line, and one person goes up, gets a demo, and they're like, holy fuck. They run off and get their buddy, two of their buddies, and come, and they come back and get in line, and then the line forms, and it's really nice. Like, I think one of the things we did right, and this is, part of the thought that we went into it, is like, let's try to under-promise and over-deliver if we can. It's hard. Like, we're still super nervous as we're sending out hundreds of these kits weekly. It's like, there's still bugs in the SDK. We know the rough spots, and it's like, we're just waiting for the moment of like someone that's got a hair crossways to be like, just rip us a new one. In fact, we were at this event a couple of months ago, and there's this XR, VR blogger, Carl Guttag, that seems to hate everything. Like, nothing's good enough for him. And I saw him get in line, and I'm like, I admire Carl a lot because I've read his blog since I worked at Valve. Like, this guy is smart when it comes to like optical systems and things like that. And I see him get in line, I'm like, crap, he's not going to understand the trade-offs we made. He's just not going to understand that, the reasons we did things, and we didn't like try to go after like the ultimate, experience. So I intercept him in the line, and I'm talking to him. I'm trying to pump him up, and of course his body language is like, I'm not having any of it. And
not gonna fall for your buttering.
Yeah. I'm selling it as hard as I can, right? But he gets up and tries the demo. He puts it on, and he's like, "Oh," and he looks up at me, and he's like, "I thought it was gonna suck." Oh. Anyway, then he just squats on the machine for like 30 minutes. Like, we only try to do a 5-minute demo, so we can run a bunch of people through. But I'm like, this guy's loving it. I'm going to give him as much time as possible. And he's kind of like almost giddy at the end of it. And he, like, at the end of like 30 minutes or so, he's like, I've been wearing this for 30 minutes. Like, I can't wear any of the other systems. I have to rip them off because it's giving me headaches and stuff. And like, oh my goodness, maybe he's not only going to like half play us when he gets back to his blog. Next day he comes back and he's like, I ordered one. And then he's like, I went home and I got some optical things and like some materials, and I got my own piece of retro reflector, like out of my own optical gear. Can I get back in line and try? I'm like, yeah, come on. And I'm standing, like, I'm still trying to butter him up and everything. And he gets up there and he's like doing all these experiments, and he's like, oh, this is good. He spends like another 30 minutes or so and tied up our whole demo line. So if you were waiting in line, I'm sorry, but it was important. And then he went back and wrote an article like, so glad it was magic. And I'm like, wow, like, he got it. And that's really cool when you have industry legends understanding the trade-offs you make.
Yeah, that was how I felt when I tried it.
rambly story.
No, it felt like magic to me. So I totally see it, and I think that everybody's got to try this thing out in person if they can. Are you going to be doing some more events in the near future that people can come to, or if they're in the
Yeah,
area?
yeah. I mean, if you're in the office, and especially if you're a game developer, like drop me a note on Twitter or something. We love bringing people to the office. Our office is really fun. Like our DNA, we have such a amazing like group of people. We're all gamers, and the whole office has like retro computers and pinball machines and clean rooms where you can see the development happening. It's a really neat experience. And then you can come by and get a demo, and maybe we can convince you to put your game on the system.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people should probably start considering. I'm a big fan of like pushing out to new platforms and new devices. Like when the iPhone one came out is when I switched to using Unity so we could work on mobile games. And then when the Vive came out, I was all over that and did a couple of launch titles. I was just all into it and just addicted to it. And it's like I feel like with these new platforms, it's a great opportunity because you can get in before the market is so big that there are $100 million budgets. You get in when the budgets are still kind of within your normal studio grasp or normal small developer grasp, and start building things that are fun and interesting and engaging. And it's a lot easier to do that when it's a whole new platform because there's all these different things you can experiment with that people haven't tried before and find new fun stuff that hasn't really been possible before. And eventually it will become easy and everybody will do it and you'll probably get replaced, but you can get into the market early and kind of get a foothold for yourself like some of the bigger VR companies have done.
Yeah, I'm super proud of our software team for making an excellent SDK. So one of our advisors was just beating into our head, like if there's something difficult in any kind of development flow, try just to make a tool to make it easier. And so a lot of us have been working in VR for a while, and especially these standalone systems. Like it's really hard to edit in real time. So like we put a lot of effort into our SDK. Like when you're in Unity or Unreal, you can edit real time. Just look over, and it's happening real time on the game board. To get your game, if you have an existing game, it's literally 5 minutes. Like we tell this to developers all the time, it takes longer to load up your Unity project than to get it rendering on our system. It's drag and drop. You just drag a prefab in, and boom, it's rendering. And then you move a couple sliders to scale it. And if you want to, you have a giant universe in your game, and you have a character that's running around it, you can just drag and drop to attach the game board gizmo to the character, and now your character's dragging the game board through this giant map. And
Oh, nice. So
and
then
also,
it'll just track along with the player wherever they go and then kind of represent them on the board.
yeah, there's a bunch of cool things you can do on the development side, and there's so many places you can explore, like you said. So for single player experiences is really cool because you have all of these really unique input schemes, like a wand, and you can see things, and you have a camera that you can put a playing card and read a QR code off of it, or a mark or something. It's like really haven't been able to experience it in that kind of intimately or that closely matched to graphics before. And so for solo games, it can be very magical, just the kind of magic trick we do with all these air quote holograms. But then when you start thinking about what can you do over distance play, can you make it feel like two people are in the room together? Yes, it turns out that as you sit there, and it has a speaker and microphone built in, you can track the wand and hands and stuff moving through and make those telepresence with people. It has this really visceral sense that someone is right there across the table from you. Like if you pick up a game character and move it while you're talking, because it is so one-to-one. I love when we do a multiplayer experience where people are fighting over a game object, and they're both grabbing it, and it's like a tug of war, and then one of them releases and it goes flying off into outer space because physics is wacky or something. It's
That's good.
It's very delightful.
So this thing has a microphone on there too.
Yeah,
And it's more and more surprises. I didn't even think about it. I was thinking a lot of local multiplayer. I hadn't even considered. Now you've got my mind going crazy with all these ideas for remote presence stuff because you've got the wand, you can kind of interpolate and just represent a player there. It doesn't have to be the physical person you can see, and you're talking to them if you're hearing their voice. That is really cool. Yeah, I just want to experiment with this thing now.
Yeah, we have a dedicated camera. Unfortunately, our hand tracking is still being migrated over from our old prototypes, but it's pretty cool when you can track a hand and represent that across a long distance, like just reaching in and pointing. And because there's this spatial lock between, it's up to the game developer if they want to have a spatially locked characters, but like just imagine something simple like checkers or something. Or chess. Actually, chess might be better. Like, I reach in and point to a particular pawn. It's like I'm pointing to the same place in this, but over long distances. And it really, I don't know, it's this trick in your mind. It feels like, yeah, that person is really there with me.
It feels like a sci-fi movie to me, like something I would expect to see in like Star Trek or Star Wars or something. They get in and start playing a game remotely with each other.
Well, we dreamed about it since we were kids, right? Since we saw Millennium Falcon. Yeah, and then for like local multiplayer, that's where things really can be heightened. That's what I'm so excited about is, so with the game board, as a game developer, you have a choice of having spatially locked objects. You have a game character. I might be looking at the front of the character from my perspective. You're across the table from me. You see the backside of the character. I still, again, same thing. I reach in and point to that game character. I'm precisely pointing to this game character that's right there. And it's one of those things that's lost in a 2D screen, right? And then there's other fun things you can do, like a fog of war. So private information for each user. So you have all your buddies around the table. You might be doing a war strategy game, and you're moving all your units around, and of course they can't see it until the fog of war lifts and the battle begins. And
yeah, it's a really fun idea.
But there's subtleties to it that most people don't realize, and we started to hit on this at Valve originally, is like with private information displays. Then there's also like, it's almost like poker. You're trying to read the motions of the other player, like, since you can see their eyes, you can see them moving their wands, there became this whole strategy of fake movements to make people think like, well, I'm moving my units over here, but actually I'm trying to move the one in a subtle way that I can move them over here when,
Yeah, like I really already dropped them, but pretend I'm moving them around and stuff.
Yeah, that becomes like a big part of it. It is so effing fun. Like, we just had this dumb maze game where you could run your characters through and shoot each other, and there were zombies moving through. And it became less about the dumb game and more about, like, am I fooling the person across the table by wiggling my wand in a particular way? Or I try to move the wand under the table a little bit and see if I can, like, somehow, like, do subtle motions, or you see them moving around, and you're like, oh, they're scanning for me, trying to look over a wall, so I better duck. There's just so much you can do, and then you can have these totally asymmetrical views, which are cool, like that forest thing that you probably got to try the first time. Is like, that's a giant map, and you can have multiplayer people that are anywhere in the map, playing all around the table or even over distance, but then you come together and you join up, and now you know that you're in the same kind of area. Hard to describe, but it's kind of cool. Like,
no, that sounds cool. I can totally see it. It's kind of like when you're in split screen 2D games, but this is much, and there's no reason you would only be limited to 2, right? I assume eventually you could get to,
it's pretty much any number.
Yeah, as many people as you can stand around there and have the performance for network wise.
Yeah, this is solving, like, one of the things we're solving for is one of the things that I want so badly. In my living room, I have 2 Xboxes, 2 PlayStations, 2 Switches, 2 televisions. I probably have $5,000 worth of gear to have a really broken multiplayer experience. It only works when 2 of us are there. The third person comes, they have to sit there and, spectate. And, I want to play action. I'm into action games, so I want action games where we're just blowing shit up all together, co-op at times, and not co-op other times, like griefing each other.
Yeah, it's I can imagine a lot of fun here. Like, I'm I think I'm gonna order a second one real quick. So I'm gonna be ready to have two. That way I
Right.
can play
Cash
multiplayer.
distraction officer, you did it.
Yeah,
You
I
did it.
definitely like need to be able to do some multiplayer experiences, especially with the idea of just hiding and showing and sharing data. Like I can, my brain's kind of going a little bit wild. It might melt.
And I don't think any of the developers have even scratched the surface yet, which is pretty exciting. Like you said, like being kind of first on a unique platform like this, you don't have to do the formula thing. You can play a little bit. And
Yeah, you
I
can totally experiment, and the simplest thing might be some crazy, awesome experience.
Yeah, I'm often asked, in particular by investors, is like, "What's your killer app?" And don't know, but we believe it's probably going to come from one guy in a garage that figures out like, hey, if you like twirl the wand this way, and it's the world's most compelling way to control a character, and who would have imagined?
I feel like it's definitely going to be something like that in probably the next 6 to 8 months. It's going to pop up, and it's going to be something insane that just blows everybody away and catches everybody off guard. I
Yeah,
want to try
yeah,
to
like
figure out what that is though beforehand.
get on it, get on it. Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, every one of our kits that have sold, it comes with the SDK for free. So, even if you're not a game developer, you know, I do a ton of like experiences on our system, and I'm a chip designer. I don't know how to code necessarily. I can do a little C# occasionally, but I'm mostly Googling it. You know, I just have a good time. That's what I do on the weekends. Is I play with Tilt 5, and it's like I'm gonna go to the asset store and like, oh, here's a fluid simulation. What if I put fluid simulation and have it perturbed by the wand? I'm like, oh my god, that's so delightful. Oh, I'm having fun, and it was like drag and drop to do most of it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about game development, just getting in there and doing that experimenting, and then especially doing it with this new hardware stuff. It's great. I when the VR headsets came out and when they were first really good, and especially with the first five, it's kind of like I think the catalyst. That
Go Val.
Yeah, it was such a cool experience, and it made it so like everything I could do. I was working on an MMO at the time, like putting it in VR. Everything that I was like, fine, like let me see it in VR, let me see it in VR, and it was all better. Everything was like, this is better, this is better, this is better. Until I got tired, of course. Eventually, I was like, okay, now I'm tired, and I want to sit back down. But and the
Yeah, I think
experience
that's the
just kind
biggest
of made
problem
it
with
so.
VR. Yeah, I know there's a lot of people that love VR, doing like the action type, or the motion type things like Beat Saber, which I find fun. Like 5 minutes, I'll do it, but I'm a lazy gamer. I want to sit on the couch. And again, Carmack maybe wasn't wrong. He was just wrong about the VR half of it. Like AR with, sitting on the couch, just playing with your friends or around the dining room table. It's just so fun. I want my beer close by, and I want to be able to see it.
Yeah, one day I want it to replace my projector screen too. Just have one of these Tilt 5 mats on the whole wall and have the whole wall out there be fighting with.
Yeah, there's some fun stuff you can do. There was a lot of people ask us like, why don't you just like paint your whole room with it? And it's like, well, part of the reason why we're really focusing on like flip the game board open, slip the glasses on. Like our goal is like 30 seconds to fun, and we've achieved that. It's just like, most of your time is flipping the game board open and plugging it into your phone or your PC and hitting the play button on your game, and that makes a big difference in like how approachable it is and how often you'll pull it out.
Yeah, for me, like I picture I've got a spot in my office that has a table that doesn't get used. I'm gonna replace it. I'm gonna put that right there. It's just gonna be set up, and I fully expect that people will just, when they come in, pop it on and start playing randomly, and start playing with whatever experiments I've got going in there at the time. So I think it'll be
Music to my ears.
it'll be fun and slightly more interesting. The table I got over there is weird, but it's not interactive, and I'm usually afraid the kids are gonna kill themselves with it.
Kids love this. Oh my god, I love when kids get to try it. Kids are so more malleable when it comes to using this tech. Like we put a Tilt 5 on them, and they're climbing on the table, and their friends are sitting over there. If they don't have the headset on, they're like looking at the preview on the monitor, and they're like the kids are in there like, move this block over here or go fight that guy, and they're pointing exactly where on the table. It's
Oh,
the
that's
kids just their minds
awesome. Yeah.
it's also really interesting too. I collect a lot of retro computer and arcade stuff. I love looking at parallels between what was it like when Nolan Bushnell and Al Alcorn were trying to do Pong. Like, how did they come up with something that shipped 100 million like that? Like, what were their trade-offs, and how did they train the users to use this new television gaming device? It was a big lift for them, and it's kind of cool. Like, I have a Fairchild Channel F out in the lobby here, right next to a Pong system, and it's like Fairchild F came out first. It had joysticks, cartridges, super advanced, and then a few years later, Al Alcorn's like, it should be knobs, and it should be super relatable and easy for anybody in the family to do. And it's like, boom, huge commercial success. And here's this other thing sitting here, basically a flop, but it looks like a modern console in many ways. And it's like, I think we're probably going to look back like 20 years from now and be like, oh, Tilt 5's so quaint. Like, they used a magic wand, Yeah. Didn't they know that eyebrow tracking was the way to really control games? Like, why wasn't it obvious?
Just read the mind. Why are you going through all this physical stuff? Right? Making people move. Well, I think what you guys have got right now blows everything else out of the water. So it's maybe in 20 years it'll be old tech, but right now it's probably the most exciting, at least gaming tech that I've seen this year and of the last couple of years. It's the most excited I've been since I saw and tried an HTC Vive in person. I saw that, I played it, I was like, this is amazing. I didn't know this was possible. And then you get the same experience here, first time with an AR product, and it was about the same level, if not more, than the VR one, because I can see this just being something that isn't stuffed away in my closet like my VR headsets, unfortunately are.
We all have a closet full of VR headsets.
Yes. I try to make sure to give them away so that somebody will get some use out of them before they get too old, but I still end up with too many, I think.
Yeah, I see a new VR game come out, and I'm like, oh, I want to try that, but damn it, I have to move my coffee table, and nah.
Yeah, I'm like, I got to go charge my Quest and figure out my other stuff. I don't want to set up my Vive because it's just too much work.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, those were all the things that we were wringing our hands about at Valve. It's like, how is Grandpa going to use a VR system? Like, okay, and then we would do the Persona stories. Like, okay, Grandpa, don't mean to pick on grandpas, but whatever. Okay, whoever, this is out of box experience. Move all your furniture out, put some lighthouses up. Now transport yourself into a synthetic world that's going to blow your mind, but you're going to feel a little vulnerable because you're going to hear creaks and noises in the house, and you're going to be ripping it off and on all the time. And it's like, I mean, I'm being overly pessimistic, but it just didn't. It didn't. The persona test didn't line up right for the mission. Actually, back at Valve, I came up with this concept. I think that VR actually comes after solid AR. So I think it goes like this: Tilt 5, half a decade, and then Tilt 5 second generation that lets you walk around the world. I'll stop saying Tilt 5, I'm a jerk. And then it's AR where you can be more mobile, but it still does a lot of the things like what we're doing right now. And form factor is going to get smaller, but then it's going to have the capability to pop it in and out of VR, and it's going to acclimate people to this kind of blended world where you're popping back and forth really fast.
That would definitely be an interesting experience. I'm really curious to see what that's like. The future has me pretty excited, though. All this new tech, like every year, I see cool new stuff, and now I'm just.
When you were a kid, can you even imagine, like, where we are today? It's crazy. Like playing in television with just squares on the screen. We're excited with 16 colors.
Oh yeah.
Photorealistic, humans with AI generated like,
Most of the stuff that comes
mesh.
out today, I never would have even imagined. I was just thinking like I wanted flying cars because I watched the Jetsons, robots that did everything for me, and still those are the two things that don't have, and the ability to play games with my friends that weren't there. That I had no idea it was going to look like that. Look
Yeah,
like anything like the world today and of the near future. It's kind of crazy. It's
I just picked up a robot from about 1983 or 84 called the Hero Junior, and I got all the marketing material with this thing, and it's amazing how forward-looking they were with the marketing material. And it's like, Hero Junior will be your companion, your security guard, your servant, or whatever. And it's like, this thing bumps into walls, gets stuck all the time. Like, I can't even, it only stays charged for 2 hours, and it's kind of how all of these industries like evolve. I just imagine like the Atari 26 came out, there was probably some visionary inside Atari like someday photorealistic humanoids and multiplayer.
be real tennis players in the ball.
Yeah, and you know, and then you look at all the things that people tried because they were so visionary and ahead of time, like modems for Sega Genesis and like
The Jaguar.
PlayStation. Yeah, where they're trying all these things. They know it's right around the corner, and it's just the timing's not right. So that'll be the test, right? Is the timing right for Tilt 5? Is it the next Nintendo Wii, or is it 5 years too early? I'm betting on its right timing since we've been at it for 8 years. I'm not buying it one more time.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that I tend to agree after actually trying the product. Had I not tried it, I would say I have no idea. But I've used it, played it, and I have to say it's definitely the right time. You just got to get it out there in front of people, and I think just get a couple developers out there making a bunch of really great experiences. So hopefully there are a couple watching today, and we'll jump in and start making something really cool and been
Well,
inspired
if you're a
'cause
developer, on our website, we have a developer portal, and if you have something that really fits the aesthetic, reach out to us, and maybe we can provide some assistance if it kind of fits into our. We have a big pie chart of how much content in each genre we want. We have puzzle games, we have action games, sports games, racing games, sandboxes, true board games, things like that. You can also, we have a lot of games in the pipeline. We have dozens of developers working on things. So keep track on our website. We have a list of games that are here today, and each week we're adding one or two more on there. Hopefully there'll be dozens a week as we start to get some momentum.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. I'm excited to get my 2 dev kits once I order the second one after this call and start playing some of them. Hopefully we get some multiplayer ones in there really quick too. Are there already multiplayer ones available, or is that coming up real soon?
Yeah. There's some that come to mind that are going to be pretty fantastic. So if you're just a traditional board game player, you can do local and distance board games. There's Tabletopia. They have about 150 games on the system, and some are simple, chess, and then others are licensed European games, like the really high-end board games on there. As well as Tilt 5, we just licensed content from Asmodee Digital. So Asmodee makes some really amazing board games, and so those are going to be under our umbrella. So we're working with some third-party studios to really make those shine, come to our system. I can't announce what they are right now, but people are going to like those. And then for people that are into tabletop role-playing, things like that, we have a couple platforms, things like Battle Map Studios that let you build dungeons and terrain. And you can actually put your real figurines down and run let's say a D&D campaign and have a virtual terrain. It's basically passive after you populate it with all your monsters and stuff and your terrain.
Oh wow.
You can use your real figures Many of these are also cross-platform too. So if your friends don't have a Tilt 5 yet, you can log in with your tablet, like Tabletopia does this, or your PC, and they can sit there and play on a tablet.
So they can miss out on the fun, and you get to have the really cool experience.
Yeah, and then we have a couple action games. Battle Planet, that one's going to be a co-op, local co-op. Once they get the drivers installed, that's going to be pretty exciting. That's one of my favorite games right now because I'm kind of a shoot-'em-up action game player. Yeah, there's a ton. There's Figman. This one I'm excited about because this is how you bridge the gap between non-game players, like grandma and grandpa that are just never been into it, and the grandkids, right? So Figman is an interesting sandbox where you can import models into it. It also already has a bunch of like 3D models in it. It has Tilt Brush integrated into it, so you can paint. It's multiplayer, so you can like paint together. You can interact with objects. Then you can add physics and game logic to it and make simple like no-code games. And it's like it's all point and click and draw and paint, and it's so easy. Like if you can work one or two buttons on the wand, you can have a good time, and you can have a good time with your friends. Then we have a ton of puzzle games. My brain's burned out from rambling on about my story, but there's like Floating Farmer and different things like this where you use the wand to move things around to solve puzzles. There's a Mummies game. I'm losing the name of it. It's another puzzle game where you move these cute little mummies and you have to like find your way through.
I want to make a strategy game myself. It's got me really inspired to make like some sort of strategy competitive puzzle type thing where people are fighting against each other secretly. I still that idea of the secret and hidden data and info, I think that's gonna make for a lot of fun.
My dream is a Command and Conquer like game.
It's my favorite. I actually was talking to high school students yesterday. They asked me what my favorite game of all time was, and I had to tell them it was Command and Conquer Zero Hour. It was probably the best RTS ever made.
Please make it Command and Conquer like that. And I would probably not do any work around the office. I'd just be trying to get people in to play it.
I think it would be a blast just watching the little tanks and the units running around and the toxin guys spraying everybody down. It sounds like a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, and then it's all heightened because now you have the poker element to it that's never been there where, oh, I see Jason's moving his wand, so he's up to something, and I'm looking at it intently, and I see he is pulling the trigger, so he's not trying to fake me out. And
what's he building? Where's he attacking? Exactly.
Yeah. It's going to be great.
I think it's going to be a blast, and I'm super excited to get mine personally. Well, I think unless there was something else you wanted to dive into, we could probably wrap it at that and just tell everybody to please order your headset, grab one, and start developing. If you start making something really cool, obviously email Jeri and everybody there. But let me know too, because I'm really curious. I want to see what people are playing and actually try them out on my own table once I have mine here. I'm super pumped for it. Did you want to just leave anybody with any final words or things that you think they should think about going forward? You've got a great history and a whole huge awesome story, so I'm sure you've got some great little nugget of advice to put you right on the spot for.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being very accommodating for my long-winded story and letting me promote the company. I always feel awkward, even going back to my racing days. I feel awkward promoting myself. I just know it's like a thing that I have to do and promote the.
Well, I think your product promotes itself enough. It's just really hard to do without seeing. Like you got to see it. So I'm more than happy to talk about how awesome it is and make sure that people aren't missing out because it's something that I think there are probably a lot of people who wouldn't know to try it out. I wouldn't have known had I not stumbled across it. I might have seen like a page and like, oh, okay, probably like every other AR thing, but would have had no clue that it was a totally different technology that blows everything else away. So I think it's more than worth promoting, and I'm happy to do it anytime.
Yeah, and I want to thank our team. Sometimes I forget to thank them enough. It's a crazy idea I had years ago. It's really like folks on our like games developer team and the software team, the manufacturing team that stays up until 4 in the morning and then gets back up in time to have meetings during the day that are just killing themselves to make sure that we can manufacture these things. It's like they don't get enough credit. Like, they should be telling you the stories, not me. And then I guess like a piece of wisdom, and I touched on it through the discussion, is like you can really get a lot of people to help you if you really appreciate what they are giving you in return. There are so many people out there in the industry, whether it's games or welders, that have a lot of like desire to share their stories and their wisdom with you. And all you have to do is just be really grateful and thank them for it, and show them that you're embracing it and using it, and they can really help propel you in your career or whatever you're trying to do. You just have to ask, and sometimes that's the most difficult part of the whole process.
Getting past that fear of just asking the question and taking the chances.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say thanks again. I really appreciate this chance to talk with you and hear these awesome stories, and especially for making this product, because I'm super excited to actually play with it. Story's awesome. The product's even better. So I'm really, really pumped about that. And I hope we can talk again about this sometime soon, and show off whatever it is that I end up developing, and the people watching.
Well, I want to see if we can accelerate your kit. I want to see what you make. Like, I don't want you at the bottom of the stack. I hope people don't mind if we accelerate.
Shortcut.